It's a feeling that visits you, like an old, unwelcome friend. Perhaps it arrives in the glow of a phone screen, a text message from someone new, but the argument feels hauntingly familiar. The words are different, but the music is the same, a painful melody you know by heart. Or maybe it's the quiet dread of a Sunday evening, the shadow of the coming work week, a feeling you've had in every job you've ever known. It's the sense of walking in a circle, of arriving at the same destination of anxiety or frustration or quiet despair. No matter which new path you thought you were taking, you feel like you are living inside an echo, performing lines from a script you never agreed to read. This experience, this feeling of being stuck in a loop, is not a coincidence. It is not just bad luck. It is a pattern, an invisible architecture, shaping our lives from just beneath the surface of our awareness. In our modern world, we are taught to look outside of ourselves for solutions. A new job, a new relationship, a new purchase, a new distraction. We scramble to change the scenery of our lives, only to find the play remains the same. This leaves us feeling exhausted, disillusioned, and powerless, wondering if we are truly the authors of our own story or merely actors reciting forgotten lines. But what if these patterns were not a prison, but a classroom? What if these recurring moments of difficulty were not a curse, but a message delivered to you by you, an invitation to finally stop and turn your attention inward? Ancient wisdom, particularly the profound teachings of Buddhism, offers a lens through which to see this. It speaks of a natural law, a principle as real and as impersonal as gravity. This law is known as karma. In the West, this word is often misunderstood as a system of cosmic punishment or reward, but its original meaning is far simpler and far more empowering. Karma means action. It is the universal law of cause and effect. It suggests that our present reality is the result of our past actions, our past words, and most importantly, our past states of mind. The patterns we are stuck in are not our fate. They are our lessons. They are the echoes of past causes, returning to us not to torment us, but to teach us. This journey we are about to take together is not about escaping your life, but about waking up within it. It is a path to decoding these lessons, understanding the script, and finally, claiming the freedom to write a new verse. Before we can change a story, we must first learn how to read it. And our lives, in many ways, are stories, written in a language we have forgotten we know. The first step on this journey inward is to simply recognize this language, to see the recurring themes and motifs that appear, chapter after chapter. We call this the echo chamber. It is the personal, invisible room in which our lives unfold. From the outside, it may seem that we are moving forward, but inside, the same sounds, the same feelings, the same conversations are bouncing off the walls, returning to us again and again. To become aware of this echo chamber is the beginning of finding the door out of it. It requires a quiet courage, a willingness to look at our own lives, not with judgment, but with a gentle, persistent curiosity. So what is a pattern in this context? It is more than just a habit, like brushing your teeth or driving the same way to work. A psychological pattern is a complex, interwoven sequence of thoughts, feelings, bodily sensations, and subsequent behaviors that unfolds automatically, often without our conscious permission. Think of a path through a dense forest. The first time you walk it, it is difficult, requiring you to push aside branches and watch your step. But if you walk that same path every day, soon a trail begins to form. The ground becomes compacted, the branches stay bent, and it becomes easier and easier to walk that route. Soon, you walk it without thinking. A psychological pattern is just like this, a certain trigger, perhaps a critical comment from your boss sets you on the path. The familiar thought arises, I am not good enough. This thought is immediately followed by a feeling, perhaps the heat of shame in your face or a hollowness in your stomach. And this uncomfortable feeling then triggers a reactive behavior. Maybe you work obsessively for the next 10 hours to prove your worth, or maybe you go home and numb the feeling with food or television. The entire sequence, from trigger to reaction, can happen in seconds. It is a well-worn groove, and our minds, seeking efficiency, will follow it every time unless we consciously intervene. The most insidious part of these patterns is that we begin to mistake them for our identity. We no longer see it as a pattern of anxiety we experience. We simply believe, I am an anxious person. We mistake the path for the entire forest. These patterns are not abstract. They manifest in the most tangible areas of our lives. Consider your relationships. Do you find yourself drawn to the same type of person again and again? Perhaps it's the emotionally unavailable partner who makes you feel you must earn their love, or the highly critical partner who mirrors a parental voice from your childhood. The faces change, but the dynamic remains. You might find yourself having the same argument, year after year, about the same core issues of trust, or freedom, or commitment. It's a dance where the steps are already choreographed, a painful ballet of idealization, followed by conflict, and ending in disillusionment, only to find a new partner to begin the same dance with. In your professional life, the pattern might be one of self-sabotage. You work brilliantly and diligently, but just as a major promotion or recognition is within reach, you miss a deadline, or pick a fight with a key colleague. Or perhaps your pattern is one of restless dissatisfaction. You start a new job full of passion and enthusiasm, but after a year or two, a familiar sense of boredom and meaninglessness creeps in. You become convinced the problem is the company, the boss, the work itself, and so you move on, only to find the same feelings resurface in the next role. The problem isn't the job, it's the pattern of seeking external validation that can never be permanently satisfied. Look at your finances. Is there a loop of behavior? Many people experience a cycle of earning and spending that is directly tied to their emotional state. A wave of sadness or loneliness hits, and the automatic response is to go online and fill a virtual cart, a brief hit of dopamine that temporarily numbs the pain, soon followed by the familiar anxiety of the credit card bill. Or perhaps the pattern is a belief in scarcity, a deep-seated fear that there will never be enough, which leads to either hoarding money with a sense of constant dread or spending it recklessly with a sense of nihilism. Even our health is governed by these loops. Think of the classic New Year's resolution. We start with great intention, a new diet, a new gym membership. But this surge of effort is often a reaction to a feeling of self-disgust. Because the root is negative, the practice becomes a punishment, and it is unsustainable. A stressful day comes, the pattern kicks in, and we find ourselves abandoning the new regimen for the familiar comfort of old habits, promising ourselves we will start again next Monday. A cycle that can repeat for a lifetime. The reason these patterns are so powerful is that they operate largely from the unconscious mind. Think of an iceberg. The small tip that you can see above the water is your conscious mind, the part of you that makes plans, sets goals, and has intentions. But the vast, massive body of ice beneath the water, unseen but immensely powerful, is the unconscious. This is where these patterns are stored. They are learned responses, defense mechanisms, and coping strategies that we likely developed in childhood to navigate our world. At the time, they may have served a purpose, but now, as adults in very different circumstances, these old programs continue to run in the background, shaping our perceptions and driving our behavior without our consent. We are being guided by a ghost map, wondering why we always end up in the same place. So how do we begin to see this invisible architecture? We begin by becoming a gentle, non-judgmental observer of ourselves. This is not about criticism or shame. It is simply about data collection. I invite you to start a practice, perhaps with a simple notebook, which you might call a pattern journal. The only goal is to watch. Don't try to fix or change anything yet. Just watch throughout your day. Whenever you notice a strong emotional reaction, a spike of anger, a wave of sadness, a knot of anxiety, take a moment to pause. And in your journal, simply note the answers to 3 questions. First, what was the trigger? Be specific. Was it an email from a certain person? A memory that surfaced? A specific comment someone made? Second, what was the immediate thought and feeling? For example, the thought was, they think I'm incompetent. The feeling was shame and a tightness in my chest. And third, what was my automatic reaction? My reaction was to become very quiet and withdrawn. Or my reaction was to check my phone and scroll endlessly. Do this for a week, without any agenda other than to notice. You are an archaeologist of your own mind, gently brushing the dust off of ancient artifacts to see their shape. You are not judging the artifact, only observing it. This practice of simple, curious observation is the first crucial act of separating yourself from the pattern. You are no longer the person lost in the storm. You are the one watching the storm from a safe place. There is an old story of a man who was lost in a vast forest. For days, he walked and walked, growing more tired and desperate. Each time he came to a fork in the path, he would instinctively turn to the left. He didn't know why. It just felt slightly more natural. Perhaps the ground was a little less rocky, or the light was a bit brighter. He walked with great determination, believing he was moving forward. But every evening he would find himself back in the exact same clearing, a place of deep despair. The man's pattern was his unconscious, automatic turn to the left. His freedom was not found by walking faster or with more effort. It came in a single moment of awareness, a moment when he stopped at a fork, truly saw his tendency to turn left, and with a conscious breath, deliberately chose to turn right. In that one small choice, his entire world changed. By observing our patterns, we are learning to see our own unconscious turn to the left. We are shining a light on the what. We see the loop, we see the echo chamber. And this naturally gives rise to a much deeper question. Why? Why do we have this tendency to always turn left? What is the invisible force that carved this path in our minds in the first place? To answer this, we must now turn to one of the most profound concepts in all of spiritual philosophy. We must begin to understand the invisible architect. We must begin to understand karma. Having witnessed the echoes in our own lives, the repeating cycles of pain and confusion, we arrive at a critical juncture. We are compelled to ask, why? What is the force that creates these patterns? The invisible hand that seems to guide us back to the same familiar heartaches and anxieties. The word that often surfaces here, whispered from ancient traditions, is karma. But this word, in its journey to the modern West, has become heavy with baggage, often misunderstood as a synonym for fate, or a kind of cosmic bookkeeping system where a divine judge hands out punishments and rewards. We imagine it as a rigid, external force, a sentence passed down for deeds in a forgotten past, leaving us feeling like helpless victims of a destiny we cannot change. To truly understand the power we have to break our patterns, we must first be willing to set aside these ideas. We must approach the concept of karma not as a sentence, but as a science, a natural law that, once understood, can become our greatest tool for liberation. The popular phrase, "what goes around, comes around captures a sliver of the truth, but it is often interpreted in a punitive way. It implies a simplistic, one-to-one retribution. If you steal money, someone will steal from you. If you lie, you will be lied to. While these things may happen, this is not the essence of karma. This view makes us fearful, constantly looking over our shoulder for cosmic punishment. Or it can make us arrogant, believing our good fortune is a sign of our inherent righteousness. More dangerously, it can lead to a profound sense of fatalism. We look at our suffering, our difficult patterns, and we resign ourselves to them, thinking, "This must be my karma," as if it were a debt we are forced to pay. This perspective is a prison. It strips us of our agency and our power to change. The Buddhist understanding of karma is the key that unlocks the door to that prison. The original Pali word is karma, and it literally translates to action or deed. That is its core meaning. Karma is not a being, a god, or a cosmic police force. It is a principle. It is the law of cause and effect as it applies to the ethical and psychological dimensions of our experience. It is as neutral and as reliable as the law of gravity. Gravity does not judge you. It doesn't care if you are a saint or a sinner. If you step off a roof, the law of gravity operates, and you will fall. In the same way, the law of karma states that every volitional action creates a result. Certain causes lead to certain effects. A farmer who plants an apple seed will not get a lemon tree. This is not a reward for planting an apple seed. It is the natural, predictable outcome of that action. Karma is simply this principle applied to our entire being. It is the immoral, natural process by which our actions, words, and thoughts shape our reality. To understand this architect, we must understand how it builds. Karma operates through three doors: the door of the body, the door of speech, and the door of the mind. The actions of the body, or kaya karma, are the most obvious. These are the physical deeds we perform: an act of violence or an act of kindness, stealing from another or offering a gift, a gesture of intimacy or a gesture of rejection. These actions leave a clear imprint on the world and within ourselves. The actions of speech, or vachi karma, are often more subtle but no less powerful. A lie can destroy trust that took years to build. Harsh words, spoken in anger, can echo in someone's mind for a lifetime. Divisive speech can turn friends into enemies. Conversely, words of truth, kindness, and encouragement can heal wounds, inspire courage, and create bonds of connection. Our words are not just sounds, they are creative forces that build or destroy the world we inhabit. But the most fundamental and powerful of these three doors is the door of the mind. This is manokamma, the karma of our thoughts, our desires, our aversions, and most critically, our intentions. The mind is the workshop, the source from which the actions of body and speech arise. A kind word may be spoken, but if the mind is filled with resentment, the seed being planted is one of resentment. You can perform a charitable act, but if your mind is preoccupied with how much praise you will receive, the primary seed you are planting is one of pride and attachment. This is the radical insight of the Buddha. He said, "It is volition, O monks, that I call karma. Having willed, one acts through body, speech, or mind. The architect is not the action itself, but the intention behind the action." This is the single most important point to grasp, because it is what transforms karma from a deterministic fate into a pathway of creative empowerment. Imagine a surgeon holding a scalpel. She makes an incision deep into a person's body, an act of cutting flesh. Now imagine a murderer holding a knife, who also makes an incision deep into a person's body. The physical action is nearly identical, but the intention, the volition, the cetana is worlds apart. One intends to heal, to remove suffering, to preserve life. The other intends to harm, to create suffering, to end life. The karmic result of these two actions, the seed planted in the mind stream of each individual, could not be more different. One leads to peace and wholesomeness, the other to agitation and profound suffering. Our intentions are the DNA of our karma. They determine the nature of the fruit that will eventually grow from our actions. Consider the story of two people who encounter a beggar on the street. The first is a wealthy merchant. Annoyed at being disturbed, he carelessly tosses a few gold coins into the beggar's bowl, making sure others on the street see his grand gesture. His mind is filled with aversion, and his intention is fueled by a desire for a good reputation. His action, though seemingly generous, plants karmic seeds of pride and irritation. A little later, a poor woman walks down the same street. She has only a single piece of bread in her bag, which was to be her only meal for the day. Seeing the beggar's hunger, her heart is filled with genuine empathy. She breaks her small piece of bread in half and places one half in his bowl with a silent, heartfelt wish for him to be free from suffering. Her external gift was small, almost insignificant compared to the merchant's gold, but her intention was pure, born from a place of genuine compassion and generosity. From a karmic perspective, the seed planted by the poor woman's small act was infinitely more wholesome and powerful than the merchant's. She cultivated love, while he cultivated ego. This understanding shifts everything. It means that at every moment, we are shaping our future. The architect of our life is not some mysterious force in our past. It is the quality of our intention, right here, right now. Our repeating patterns are the harvest of seeds planted by our past intentions. The anxiety we feel is the fruit of past fear. The anger that arises is the fruit of past aversion. The longing we feel is the fruit of past attachment. They are not punishments. They are simply the flowers that have grown from the seeds we have sown. But here is the beautiful, liberating truth. We are standing in the field right now, and in our hands we hold new seeds. With every thought, with every intention, we are planting the garden of our future. So, if intention is the seed, and our life is the garden that grows from it, then the next crucial question is this: what is the soil? Where, exactly, are these powerful seeds of karma sown? To understand that, we must turn our gaze toward the very ground of our being, the mind itself. If intention is the seed of karma, the silent, powerful cause of our future experience, then we must ask the most practical question of all: where do these seeds fall? Where are they planted? The answer is as intimate and as immediate as your own awareness. The soil is your mind. Think of your mind not as a machine, a computer that simply processes data, but as a vast, fertile, and living field. This field is inherently neutral. It has no preference for what grows within it. It will devotedly nurture a seed of hatred just as readily as it will nurture a seed of love. It will grow a forest of anxiety just as willingly as it will grow a meadow of peace. Its nature is simply to receive what is given and to provide the conditions for growth. Every moment of your life, every action you take, every word you speak, and every thought you entertain is a seed that you are casting into this field, and nothing that is cast into this field is ever truly lost. To deepen this understanding, we can shift the metaphor from a static field to a flowing river. In Buddhist thought, the mind is not seen as a fixed entity or an object, but as a continuous process, a stream of interconnected moments of consciousness. This is called the Sita Santana, or the mind stream. It is a ceaseless flow of knowing, feeling, and perceiving that has been flowing since beginningless time. When a karmic seed and intention is formed, It is dropped into this river. It doesn't vanish. It is carried along in the current, becoming part of the river's constitution. It may sink beneath the surface, hidden from our immediate view, but it is still there, traveling with us, a latent potential held within the flow of our own being. This explains the profound and often mysterious way that an action or experience from many years ago, perhaps even one we have consciously forgotten, can suddenly surface and influence our present reality. The seed was simply carried downstream, waiting in the riverbed of the mind for the right conditions to sprout. The ripening of these karmic seeds is not random. It follows a natural law, just as a botanical seed does. A seed of an oak tree may lie dormant in the cold ground all winter. It holds the complete potential for a massive tree, but it will not grow. It needs conditions. It needs the warmth of the spring sun, the nourishment of rain, and the passage of time. In the same way, a karmic seed lodged in our mind stream needs conditions to ripen and manifest as an experience. These conditions, known in Buddhism as pakaya, can be either external or internal. An external condition might be someone's harsh words, a stressful event at work, or even a particular song on the radio. An internal condition might be a memory, a feeling of physical tiredness, or another thought. When the right combination of conditions arises, it waters the dormant seed. The seed then sprouts and ripens into its fruit, its vipaka. And what is this fruit? It is our direct experience. It is the sudden surge of anger, the wave of sadness, the knot of anxiety, the feeling of warmth, the compassionate impulse. These feelings and states of mind don't come from nowhere. They are the ripening of seeds that we ourselves have planted. Here we find the very engine of our repeating patterns, the mechanism of the echo chamber. The process is a self-perpetuating loop. First, a dormant seed from a past action ripens. For example, a seed of aversion planted long ago ripens now, under the right conditions, as a feeling of irritation or anger. This is the harvest. This is the moment we feel the familiar sting of the pattern. But what happens next is the most crucial moment of all. What do we do with this fruit? How do we react to this feeling of anger? If our reaction is unconscious, if we identify with the anger and act it out by snapping at a loved one, sending an aggressive email, or seething in silent resentment, then in that very moment of reaction, we are taking the fruit of the old harvest and planting its seeds all over again. We are taking the thorny weed of anger and shaking its seeds back into the fertile soil of our mind. And in doing so, we guarantee a future harvest of more anger. We strengthen the neural pathway. We deepen the groove. We water the weeds, ensuring that the same thorny patch will be waiting for us again in the future. This is why our patterns feel so intractable. Each time we follow the loop, we are both experiencing the result of the past and creating the cause for the future. We are the farmer who complains about the sour fruit of his trees, while simultaneously planting more seeds from that same sour fruit. It is a cycle of karmic bondage, but one that is maintained, moment by moment, by our own unconscious reactions. The good news, the profoundly hopeful news, is that because the cycle is maintained in the present moment, it can also be broken in the present moment. We have the power to stop planting the seeds. Consider the parable of the farmer and his garden. A man inherits a beautiful, vast plot of land, which is his own mind. Over many years, he has been careless. He has allowed seeds of all kinds to be sown by the winds of experience. Now, his garden is a chaotic mix. In one corner, beautiful, fragrant flowers of kindness and joy bloom. In another, there are patches of sharp, thorny bushes of anger. Elsewhere, there are thick, choking vines of anxiety. And in the shadows, poisonous mushrooms of jealousy and envy grow. The farmer spends his days complaining about the state of his garden. He is constantly scratched by the thorns of anger, and he feels sick from the poison of envy. In his frustration, he tries to attack the weeds. He hacks at the thorny bushes with a machete, but this only seems to make them grow back thicker. He stomps on the poisonous mushrooms, but in doing so, he releases their spores, which spread even further on the wind. All the while, he pays little attention to the beautiful flowers, taking their fragrance and beauty for granted. He feels like a victim of his own garden. Then one day, a wise neighbor comes and speaks with him. The neighbor doesn't offer a magic solution. She simply invites him to sit and observe his garden with patience. She tells him, the state of this garden is not a punishment. It is simply a reflection of what you have cultivated, consciously or unconsciously. The power to change it does not lie in fighting the weeds, but in choosing what you will cultivate from this day forward. The farmer begins to understand. He realizes his angry hacking was just planting more seeds of violence. He learns to stop watering the weeds of anxiety with his worried thoughts. He learns to gently, mindfully, pull up the thorny bushes of anger, one by one, without agitation. And most importantly, he begins to turn his attention to the flowers. He waters them with his care. He gives them the sunlight of his attention. He clears the space around them so they can flourish. He begins to actively plant more seeds of the flowers he wishes to see. Over time, the garden doesn't become perfect overnight. Weeds still sprout, but slowly, gradually, the balance shifts. The fragrance of the flowers begins to overpower the poison of the weeds. The garden transforms. We are all this farmer. Our mind is our garden, and the patterns that trouble us are the weeds we have been unconsciously watering for years. To change the garden, we must first learn to identify the most common and destructive weeds. We must learn to recognize the fundamental poisons that we allow to contaminate our soil. For if we cannot tell a weed from a flower, how can we ever hope to cultivate a life of peace? To be a skillful gardener of the mind is to learn the art of discernment. It is not enough to know that weeds exist. We must learn to identify them by name, to understand their nature, their roots, and how they propagate. In the soil of our minds, Buddhist wisdom points to three primary, fundamental weeds, three root toxins that are the source of all the others. They are known as the three poisons. These are not merely negative emotions or character flaws. They are the very fuel for the karmic engine. They are the energetic charge that powers the endless loop of our repeating patterns, keeping us bound to the cycle of suffering and dissatisfaction. These three poisons are greed, hatred, and delusion. To understand them is to understand the very heart of our predicament. The first poison is greed, known in Pali as lobha or raga. This is the energy of pulling, grasping, clinging, and attachment. When we think of greed, we often imagine a lust for money or material possessions, and that is certainly one of its crudest forms. But its nature is far more subtle and pervasive. It is the constant, nagging feeling of I want, or I need, or I must have. It is the itch that is never fully scratched. This greed manifests as a craving for pleasant sensory experiences, the taste of a particular food, the temporary high from a new purchase, the validation from a like on social media. We chase these fleeting pleasures, believing that if we can just get enough of them, we will finally be happy. Yet, the satisfaction is always momentary, leaving us empty and needing the next fix. This is the engine of consumerism and addiction, a pattern built entirely on the poison of greed. Even more powerfully, greed manifests as attachment to people. We cling to our loved ones, not out of pure love, but out of a fear of being alone, a desire for them to make us feel whole. We want them to be a certain way, to meet our needs, to conform to our idea of who they should be. This isn't love. It is a form of psychological ownership, and it is the direct cause of jealousy, possessiveness, and the profound pain we feel when relationships inevitably change or end. We also cling fiercely to our ideas, our opinions, and our identities. We become attached to the idea of ourselves as a smart person, a successful person, or a good person. We cling to our political beliefs or our spiritual doctrines. This attachment makes us rigid, defensive, and terrified of being wrong because we mistake our temporary views for our fundamental self. Greed, in all its forms, creates a world of insufficiency, a constant feeling that something is missing, driving us to grasp for things outside of ourselves in a futile search for lasting peace. The second poison is hatred or aversion, known as dosa. This is the polar opposite of greed. It is the energy of pushing away, rejecting, resisting, and destroying. It is the visceral feeling of I don't want or get away from me. Its most obvious forms are anger, rage, resentment, and ill will. It is the hot, reactive energy that arises when our desires are frustrated or when we feel threatened. We see this in patterns of explosive temper, in long-held grudges that poison our hearts, and in the jealousy that wishes for another's misfortune. But like greed, hatred's most common forms are far more subtle. It is the chronic irritation we feel when waiting in line, the impatience with a slow driver, the annoyance at a colleague's habits. It is the cold judgment we pass on others, and even more frequently, on ourselves. That critical inner voice that constantly tells you that you are not good enough, not smart enough, not attractive enough. That is the poison of aversion turned inward. Even boredom is a subtle form of hatred. It is an aversion to the present moment, a rejection of what is happening right now, because it is not stimulating enough. We push away the quiet, the simple, the mundane, and in doing so, we push away our own life. Aversion, in all its forms, creates a world of threats and irritants. It casts other people and situations as obstacles to our happiness. It fuels patterns of conflict, blame, and isolation. Where greed pulls the world toward us in an attempt to find happiness, hatred pushes the world away in an attempt to destroy unhappiness. Both are born from the same fundamental misunderstanding. This brings us to the third and most fundamental poison, the root from which the other two grow. This is delusion or ignorance, known as moha or avidya. This is the taproot of the entire weed system. It is crucial to understand that delusion does not mean stupidity or a lack of factual knowledge. A person can have a PhD and still be deeply deluded. Delusion is a fundamental blindness, a cognitive fog that prevents us from seeing the true nature of reality. It is the darkness in the room that allows us to mistake one thing for another. Specifically, it is the ignorance of the three basic truths of our existence: that all things are impermanent, that clinging to impermanent things leads to suffering, and that there is no fixed, solid, independent self to be found. Because we are deluded, because we don't truly, deeply see that everything is in a constant state of flux, we develop greed. We try to grasp and hold on to pleasant experiences, people, and identities as if they were permanent fixtures that could provide us with permanent security. It is like trying to build a stone fortress on the surface of a flowing river. Because we are deluded, because we believe in a solid, separate me that needs to be protected, we develop hatred. We perceive unpleasant experiences, difficult people, and criticism as threats to this precious self, and so we try to push them away or destroy them. Delusion is what makes us identify with our patterns. When we think, "I am just an anxious person," that statement is a product of delusion. It mistakes a temporary, conditioned mental state for a permanent, solid identity. Delusion is the poison that convinces us that the chains we wear are actually our own skin. To illustrate how these three poisons work together, Consider this classic parable. A man is walking home along a path at dusk. The light is fading. On the path ahead, he sees a long, coiled shape. Instantly, his mind identifies it, a snake. This is delusion, the initial misperception. Because he believes he sees a snake, the second poison, hatred or aversion, immediately arises. His heart pounds with fear. Adrenaline courses through his veins. He wants to get away from this threat. He wants to destroy it. Based on this aversion, he may be propelled into an action fueled by the greed for survival, the craving to be safe, and so he runs away. The entire painful experience, the perception of a threat, the fear, the flighties born from that initial moment of delusion. Now, imagine a friend comes along the path with a lantern. She hears the man's panicked story about the snake. She shines the bright light of the lantern on the object. In the clear light, both of them can see plainly that it is not a snake at all. It is just an old piece of coiled rope. In that single moment of seeing clearly, what happened? The delusion, the belief in the snake is instantly shattered. And in the very same instant that the delusion vanishes, the fear, the aversion, the hatred also completely disappear. There is no snake to be afraid of. There is no threat to push away. There is nothing to run from. The problem dissolved not because he fought the snake, but because he saw the truth of the situation. We are all this man, walking in the twilight of our own confusion, our repeating patterns, our anxiety, our anger, our addictions are the coiled snakes we see on our path. They seem so real, so solid, and so threatening, and our automatic reaction is to be consumed by aversion or by craving. We spend our lives either running from these snakes or trying to attack them. But the path to freedom does not lie in fighting the snake. It lies in finding a lantern. It lies in cultivating a light bright enough to see the rope for what it is. This naturally leads us to the essential question: how do we light this lantern? How do we develop the capacity to see clearly, to shine a light on our own inner world so that the delusions that fuel our suffering can finally dissolve? The answer lies in the practice that sits at the very heart of the Buddhist path. The answer is mindfulness. The story of the snake and the rope reveals a profound truth. Our suffering is not caused by reality itself, but by our deluded perception of it. The problem was not the rope, but the belief in the snake. This begs the most important question on this entire journey. How do we acquire the lantern? How do we cultivate the bright, steady light that dispels the shadows of delusion and allows us to see the rope for what it is? The answer, the very practice at the heart of this path to freedom, is called mindfulness. In the Pali language, this is sati. While it has become a popular buzzword in the modern world, its true meaning is deep, practical, and transformative. It is the art and science of waking up. Mindfulness, in its simplest and most useful definition, is the practice of paying attention in a particular way, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack those three critical components. On purpose means that it is a conscious and deliberate act. Our attention is usually scattered, pulled from one thought to the next, hijacked by external distractions. Mindfulness is the intentional act of choosing where we place our attention. In the present moment is the where. Our mind loves to live anywhere but here. It dwells in the past, replaying old conversations and nursing old grievances, or it rockets into the future, rehearsing for anxieties that may never happen. Mindfulness is the gentle but firm training of bringing the mind back, again and again, to the only time that is ever real, right now. And finally, non-judgmentally, this is perhaps the most challenging and most healing component. It means observing our experience with a quality of kindness, curiosity, and acceptance. We watch our thoughts, feelings, and sensations arise and pass away without labeling them as good or bad, without criticizing ourselves for having them. Before we go further, it is vital to clear away some common misunderstandings. Mindfulness is not about stopping your thoughts. This is a futile and frustrating endeavor. The mind produces thoughts. That is its nature, just as the heart beats. Trying to force your mind to be silent is like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. The moment you release the pressure, it will explode to the surface with even greater force. The goal of mindfulness is not to eliminate thoughts, but to change our relationship to them, to see them as passing mental events rather than absolute truths. Secondly, mindfulness is not an escape from reality or a way to bliss out. In fact, it is the exact opposite. It is a courageous turning towards reality in all its messiness, its pain, and its beauty. Its primary purpose is not relaxation, though a sense of calm is often a welcome side effect. Its primary purpose is clarity. It is the cultivation of a mind that is clear, stable, and insightful enough to see through the delusions that cause our suffering. Imagine your mind is ordinarily like a dark room where a dozen different flashlights are flickering on and off, pointing in every direction, creating a chaos of shifting shadows and confusing lights. This is our normal state of scattered attention. Mindfulness is the practice of learning to pick up a single, powerful spotlight and choosing, deliberately, where to shine it. We can shine it on the feeling of the air entering our nostrils. We can shine it on the sensation of our feet on the ground. We can shine it on the sound of a bird outside the window. We can even shine it on a difficult emotion, like anger, not to analyze it, but simply to see its raw, energetic texture. The practice is the constant, gentle returning of the spotlight to our chosen object of attention every time it wanders away. In doing so, we are not just paying attention, we are strengthening the very muscle of attention itself. The true power of this practice, in breaking our karmic patterns, lies in its ability to create a space. For most of us, life is an unconscious chain of stimulus and reaction. A stimulus occurs, someone cuts us off in traffic and an instantaneous reaction happens, a surge of anger, a shouted curse, a raised heart rate. There is no space between the event and our reaction. We are a machine, an automaton running an old program. Mindfulness creates a pause. It inserts a moment of awareness into that chain. The stimulus occurs, the car cuts us off. But now, because we have been practicing, we can feel the heat of anger begin to rise in our chest. We can notice the thought, "What a jerk," begin to form in our mind. We can feel the impulse to honk the horn, but we are watching it happen, as if in slow motion. We are in the space between stimulus and response. And in this space, we are free. In this space, we have a choice. We can see the old, familiar path of anger, but we are no longer compelled to walk down it. We can choose to take a deep breath instead. We can choose to relax our grip on the steering wheel. We can choose to let it go. In this sacred pause lies our entire power to change, to choose a new path, to plant a new seed. This is where we stop being a reactor and start becoming a responder. The most reliable place to find this present moment is in the body. Our thoughts can be anywhere, but our breath is always happening now. Our physical sensations are always here. The body is our anchor to the present. You can experience this right now. Wherever you are, just take a moment. Feel the weight of your body on the chair or the floor. Notice the points of contact. Feel the texture of your clothing against your skin. Now, bring your attention to your breath. Don't try to change it or control it. Just feel the natural sensation of the air entering your body and the sensation of the air leaving your body. When your mind wanders, as it will, Just gently and kindly notice where it went, and then guide it back to the feeling of the breath. In doing this, you are pulling your energy out of the frantic storytelling of the mind and grounding it in the simple, tangible reality of the present. This is the fundamental practice. It is simple, but it is not easy. Yet it holds the key to untangling our deepest patterns. There is a profound Buddhist teaching known as the parable of the two arrows, which perfectly illustrates this power. The Buddha taught that in life, we will all be struck by a first arrow. This arrow is the unavoidable pain of human existence. It is loss, sickness, disappointment, accidents, the unkindness of others. No one, no matter how wise or good, is immune to these first arrows. They are a given. The real suffering, however, begins with the second arrow. The second arrow is the one we shoot at ourselves. It is our reaction to the first arrow. The first arrow is the pain of a headache. The second arrow is the thought, "Oh no, this is going to ruin my whole day. I can't function like this. Why is this happening to me?" The first arrow is a criticism from your boss. The second arrow is the storm of self-doubt, shame, and anger that follows. The second arrow is the story we tell. The judgment, the resistance, the self-pity. This second arrow is the fuel of our karmic patterns. Mindfulness practice is the art of learning to feel the sharp sting of the first arrow without picking up and firing the second one. It allows us to be with the raw, clean pain of reality without adding the immense and unnecessary layer of our own mental suffering on top. It teaches us how to hold our pain with compassion and clarity, rather than reacting to it with fear and aversion. By cultivating this inner spotlight, this sacred pause, we gain the ability to see our patterns as they arise and the freedom to choose not to follow them. We learn to endure the first arrow, and we lay down the second. But as we hold this lantern of mindfulness steady, a new question arises. What do we begin to see when we look deeply into our experience, moment by moment? What fundamental truths about the nature of our thoughts, our feelings, and our world are revealed? The first and most profound insight that emerges from the stillness is the truth of ceaseless, relentless change. We begin to see, in our own direct experience, the truth of impermanence. When we hold the lantern of mindfulness steady, when we quiet the frantic storytelling of the mind and simply dare to look at our raw experience, a fundamental truth begins to dawn. It is the first great insight, the master key that unlocks countless doors of wisdom. It is the truth of impermanence. In the Pali language, this is anicca. This is not a complex philosophical argument to be debated, but a direct, observable reality to be witnessed, moment by moment. It is the profound and simple recognition that everything, without exception, is in a state of constant, unrelenting flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. The entire universe, from the farthest star to the most intimate thought, is a flowing, dynamic, and ceaseless river of change. Initially, this realization can be unsettling. We spend our lives seeking stability, building solid ground beneath our feet, only to discover that we are, and have always been, living on the surface of a moving river. But as we continue to look with gentle courage, we discover that this truth is not a source of despair, but the very foundation of our freedom. We can begin by observing this law in the world around us. It is written into the fabric of nature. Look at the arc of a single day. The soft light of dawn gives way to the bright intensity of midday, which mellows into the long shadows of afternoon, finally dissolving into the deep darkness of night. It is a cycle of constant, graceful change. A flower blooms in a burst of vibrant color, but this peak of expression is fleeting. Inevitably, its petals wilt, its color fades, and it returns to the earth from which it came. The mighty mountain that seems to be the very symbol of permanence is, over eons, being ground down into sand by the patient, persistent forces of wind and water. The seasons turn in their great, unending wheel, each giving way to the next. The world we see is not a collection of solid, separate objects, but a symphony of processes, a dance of arising and passing away. This truth is just as evident in the world we create. The new car, a source of pride and joy, inevitably acquires its first scratch. Its paint begins to fade, and eventually, rust begins to eat away at its frame. The grandest buildings, monuments to human ambition, begin to decay the moment they are completed, requiring constant maintenance to fight the inevitable pull of entropy. The fashions we once thought were the pinnacle of style now look dated and quaint. The powerful empires of history, which saw themselves as eternal, now exist only as ruins and stories in books. To see this is not to be cynical, it is to be realistic. It is to recognize that we live in a world where the only constant is change itself. By accepting this universal law in the world outside, we can begin to accept it in the world inside. Now, we bring the spotlight of observation even closer to this body we call our own. We tend to experience our body as a solid, continuous thing, a me that we inhabit. But modern biology confirms what the Buddha observed 2,500 years ago. The body is not a noun, it is a verb, it is a process. At this very moment, millions of your cells are dying, and millions of new cells are being born. The skin you have today is not the skin you had a month ago. Your skeleton replaces itself over the course of about a decade. You are quite literally not the same person, physically, that you were 7 years ago. You are a flowing river of biological activity, a temporary colony of interdependent processes. We witness this in the broad strokes of a lifetime. The helpless infant becomes a curious child, who grows into an awkward adolescent, who matures into an adult, who then gracefully or ungracefully moves into old age. Look at a photograph of yourself from 10 or 20 years ago. The form is different, the cells are different, the experiences are different. It is like looking at a dear, familiar stranger. On a smaller scale, this change is constant. The rhythm of your breath is a ceaseless pattern of expansion and contraction. The sensation of hunger arises, you eat, and it subsides. Energy waxes and wanes throughout the day. Aches and pains appear and disappear. Our bodies are a microcosm of the universe, a vivid and constant demonstration of anicca. This is all interesting, but the insight that truly begins to dismantle the prison of our patterns is when we turn this light of mindfulness onto the mind itself. Here, in the flow of our own consciousness, we discover that the river of change is a rushing torrent. Let's start with our feelings and emotions. No feeling is final. No emotion is a permanent resident. They are all temporary visitors. Think of a moment of pure joy. It feels wonderful, and our immediate instinct is to grasp it, to hold on to it, but we cannot. It peaks, it plateaus, and eventually it fades, leaving behind a pleasant memory. Think of a moment of deep sadness or grief. It can feel all-consuming, a heavy, dark cloud that we believe will never lift, but it does. The storm passes, the intensity lessens, other feelings arise. A moment of anger can flare up like a fire, hot and powerful. It feels as if it will burn forever, but if we can watch it with mindful attention, without adding more fuel in the form of angry thoughts, we can feel its energy crest and then naturally burn itself out. This is why Buddhist teachings often compare our awareness to the vast, open sky and our emotions to the weather that passes through it. Sometimes the sky is filled with the bright sunshine of happiness. Sometimes it is covered by the dark clouds of sorrow. Sometimes there is the violent lightning of anger. But the sky itself is not the weather. The sky is the vast, open space that allows the weather to come and go. It is unharmed by the storm. Mindfulness allows us to shift our identity from the weather to the sky. Our patterns are a form of weather addiction. We are addicted to chasing the sunshine of pleasant feelings and desperately trying to prevent the storms of unpleasant feelings. This struggle against the natural flow of the emotional river is precisely what creates the suffering. We are trying to command the tides. The wisdom of impermanence teaches us to become a skillful sailor, navigating the waves of emotion with awareness and balance, rather than trying to stop the ocean from moving. Even more fleeting than our emotions are our thoughts. If emotions are weather, thoughts are like individual raindrops or snowflakes. When we begin to practice mindfulness, we are often shocked to witness the sheer chaos of our own mind. A thought about what to have for dinner is followed by a memory from primary school, which is followed by a worry about a future meeting, which is followed by a mental comment about the room we are in. Thoughts arise, unbidden, and disappear just as quickly. They are like bubbles rising to the surface of a pond, shimmering for a moment before popping and vanishing without a trace. The problem is that we don't treat them like bubbles. We treat them like solid bricks. A thought appears in the mind, a fleeting, conditioned, impersonal event, like I am a failure. And we reach out, grab that bubble, and refuse to let it pop. We solidify it. We believe it. We build a house of suffering out of it. And then we wonder why we feel trapped. Understanding the impermanence of thought is profoundly liberating. It means we don't have to believe everything we think. We can learn to see our thoughts as just thoughts. They are mental weather. We can notice them, acknowledge them. There's that failure thought again, and let them float on by without getting entangled in their drama. This is the key to breaking the cycle of rumination that fuels so many patterns of anxiety and depression. The pattern is not the initial thought. The pattern is the act of grabbing the thought and holding on for dear life. When we truly see that even our most persistent and painful thoughts are impermanent, they begin to lose their power over us. We realize that the statement, "I am an anxious person," is a lie. It implies a solid, permanent state of being. The truth that mindfulness reveals is, the feeling of anxiety, a temporary and conditioned phenomenon, is arising in this moment. This shift from I am to I am experiencing is a seismic shift in perspective. It is natural that for some, this teaching might initially sound depressing or nihilistic. If everything is changing and nothing lasts, what's the point? But this is a misunderstanding. The truth of impermanence, when fully embraced, is the foundation of all hope, joy, and courage. Think about it. If things were permanent, there would be no possibility of change. If your anxiety was a permanent part of you, you would be stuck with it forever. If your past mistakes were permanently etched into your being, you could never grow or be redeemed. It is the very fact that everything changes that makes liberation possible. Your past does not have to equal your future. The pain you feel right now is not your final destination. Because of impermanence, healing is possible, growth is possible, awakening is possible. This truth also gives us the strength to endure hardship. When we are in the midst of great pain, physical or emotional, the thought that it will last forever is what creates despair. But when we know, from a place of deep wisdom, that this too shall pass, we can bear it with greater patience and fortitude. We know the storm will end. And conversely, the understanding of impermanence allows us to appreciate the preciousness of life's joys. When we are having a beautiful moment with a loved one or watching a spectacular sunset, the knowledge that this moment is fleeting and will never come again in exactly the same way allows us to be fully present for it. We don't take it for granted, we savor it, not by clinging to it, but by engaging with it completely, with an open and grateful heart. There is a timeless story of a powerful king who summoned his wisest sages. He said to them, "I want you to create a message for me, inscribed on a ring, that will be true and appropriate in every possible situation. When I am filled with the joy of victory, it should temper me. When I am in the depths of despair, it should console me." The sages conferred, and after some time they returned to the king and presented him with a simple ring. Etched upon it were 4 words, "This too shall pass." The king understood. In moments of triumph, the ring reminded him of his humility and the transient nature of his power. In moments of sorrow, it reminded him of the enduring truth of change and gave him hope. This is the wisdom of Anika. It is our ring. It is the truth that allows us to soften our grip on life, to stop fighting the current of the river and instead learn to flow with it. It allows us to meet both pleasure and pain with a balanced and peaceful mind. It dissolves the rigid identities and self-concepts that keep our patterns locked in place. And as we rest in this understanding, as we watch the ever-changing stream of our body, feelings, and thoughts flow by, an even more profound question naturally begins to surface. If the body is always changing, if feelings are always changing, and if thoughts are always changing, then who or what is the I that is watching all of this? If everything in our experience is impermanent, where can we find a permanent, unchanging self? This piercing question leads us directly to the next great insight, and to the very heart of Buddhist wisdom, the truth of no self. The deep, experiential understanding of impermanence, the truth that everything is a flowing river, inevitably washes away the ground we thought we stood upon. As we watch our body, our feelings, and our thoughts arise and pass away like clouds in the sky, a profound and unsettling question begins to surface. If the body is not a permanent me, if my feelings are not a permanent me, and if my thoughts are not a permanent me, then who am I? Where is the thinker of the thoughts, the feeler of the feelings? Where is the stable, continuous self at the center of this ever-changing storm? In asking this question, we arrive at the doorstep of what is considered the most unique, most challenging, and ultimately most liberating teaching of the Buddha. It is the teaching of no self, or anatta. Before we proceed, it is essential to clear the path of a great misunderstanding. The teaching of no self does not mean that you do not exist. It is not an argument for nihilism or annihilation. You are clearly here, reading these words, thinking these thoughts. The teaching is far more subtle and psychologically profound. It suggests that we do not exist in the way we think we do. Our deep-seated, intuitive, and unquestioned assumption is that inside each of us there is a core, a central command module, a permanent and independent entity that is the I. We imagine this self as a kind of CEO in the headquarters of our head. This little person sits behind our eyes, looking out at the world. It is the owner of our experiences, the author of our action. It is this I that feels proud or ashamed, that makes decisions, that remembers the past and plans for the future. Our very language reinforces this view at every turn. We say, "I have a body," which implies a possessor and a possession. We say, "My anger got the best of me," as if the anger is a rebellious subject and I am the rightful king. We believe this I is a continuous thread that runs from our birth to our death, a stable entity that experiences the changing world. This belief in a solid, separate self is the bedrock assumption of our entire life. The Buddhist path invites us not to blindly reject this, but to do something far more radical, to actually go looking for it. Like a diligent scientist, the Buddha did not simply make a statement. He proposed an investigation. If this permanent, independent self exists, it must be findable somewhere within our actual, lived experience. He broke down the totality of what we call a person into 5 fundamental components, known as the 5 aggregates or the 5 heaps, and invited us to examine each one. First, there is the aggregate of form. This is our physical body and all matter. We have already seen through the lens of impermanence that the body is in a constant state of flux. It is a process, not a static thing. Can something that is so clearly unstable and changing be the permanent self? Furthermore, we cannot fully command our body. It gets sick against our will. It ages despite our protests, and it feels pain when we wish it wouldn't. If we cannot exert absolute control over it, how can we truly say, "This is me, this is mine"? So, the self cannot be found in the body. Second is the aggregate of feeling. This includes all our sensations, categorized as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. As we saw, feelings are like the weather. They arise based on contact with the world, and they pass away. A pleasant feeling comes, and we grasp for it. An unpleasant one comes, and we push it away. They are fleeting, transient visitors. Can this constant stream of fleeting feelings be the stable, enduring self? Clearly not. The self cannot be found in feelings. Third is the aggregate of perception. This is the mental faculty that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It's the part of the mind that says tree, blue, car, or insult. Our perceptions are also conditioned and impermanent. A person from one culture may perceive a comment as a compliment, while a person from another may perceive it as an insult. Our perception of a situation changes drastically based on our mood. So, perception is also an unreliable, changing process. The self cannot be found here. Fourth, we have the aggregate of mental formation. This is a broad and vital category that includes all our volitional activities. It is the home of our habits, our biases, our opinions, our beliefs, our moods, and most importantly for our investigation, our repeating karmic patterns, the tendency towards anxiety, the habit of procrastination, the recurring thought of not being good enough. These are all mental formations. They are not a solid self. They are conditioned processes, paths in the forest that have been worn deep through repeated action. Like all the other aggregates, they are impermanent and subject to change. Finally, we come to the fifth aggregate, consciousness. This might seem like the last best hope for finding a self. This is the raw faculty of knowing, the awareness that is present when we see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think. But the Buddha explained that even consciousness is not a singular, monolithic entity. It arises dependently. I consciousness arises only when an I and a visible form come together. Ear consciousness arises only when an ear and a sound come together. It is not a permanent, unchanging backdrop of awareness, but a flickering, moment-to-moment process of knowing that is completely dependent on the other aggregates and sense objects. It, too, is part of the river of change. After conducting this exhaustive, inward-looking investigation, we are left with a startling conclusion. We have looked at our body, our feelings, our perceptions, our mental habits, and even consciousness itself. And in none of these places can we find a permanent, independent, unchanging self. The CEO is not in the office. The ghost is not in the machine. A famous ancient text tells of a dialogue between the sage Nagasena and King Milinda. The king asks Nagasena his name, and Nagasena replies that Nagasena is just a designation, a convenient name, but that no permanent person can be found. The king, confused, asks, "If there is no person, then who is it that wears these robes and eats this food?" Nagasena responds by asking the king about his chariot. "Your Majesty, is the pole the chariot?" "No, venerable sir," replied the king. "Is the axle the chariot? Are the wheels the chariot? Is the frame the chariot?" To each question, the king replied, "Number." Nagasena then declared, "Then chariot is just a name, a convenient label we apply to the functional assembly of these parts. It has no independent existence apart from them. In the same way," he explained, "self is the convenient label we apply to the functioning assembly of the 5 aggregates." This might still sound abstract, but its implications for our suffering and our patterns are earth-shattering. Why is seeing this liberating? Because the vast majority of our mental pain comes from the tireless, stressful job of protecting, defending, and gratifying this fictional CEO self. When the thought "I am a failure" arises, the suffering comes from the belief that a permanent I has been stained by a permanent quality called failure. But through the lens of anatta, we can see that a conditioned thought pattern, a mental formation, has simply arisen in the field of awareness. It is not a personal indictment. It is impersonal weather. The sting is gone. Think of our patterns of anger, anxiety, and greed. They are all strategies employed by this imaginary self to control the universe. Anger arises to defend the self from perceived threats. Anxiety arises to protect the self from potential future harm. Greed arises to aggrandize the self with pleasant experiences and possessions. When we see, even for a moment, that this self we are so desperately trying to protect is an illusion, the energy that fuels these patterns begins to drain away. The whole project of self-defense and self-gratification begins to seem absurd. We are no longer the prisoner trapped inside the pattern. We become the open, spacious awareness in which the pattern, the thought, the feeling, the impulse seeking arise and pass away without us having to identify with it. This creates psychological space, a profound sense of ease, and an unshakable freedom. When we begin to see ourselves not as a solid, vulnerable noun, but as a flowing, interconnected verb, our entire relationship to life changes. When we see that our own suffering is not truly mine in some ultimate sense, we can hold it with more lightness and compassion. And when we see that the hurtful actions of others are not the result of some solid, evil self inside them, but are the result of their own conditioned patterns and their own suffering, our capacity for understanding deepens immensely. This naturally leads us to our next exploration. How does this profound insight into our shared, selfless nature change the way we relate to ourselves and to all other beings who are caught in the same predicament? It leads us to the heart of compassionate action. The journey inward can be a treacherous one. As we hold up the lantern of mindfulness and begin to see our patterns with stark clarity, the deep grooves of anxiety, the hot flush of anger, the hollow ache of inadequate, your first instinct is often one of self-recrimination. We see the flaw, the broken part of ourselves, and we declare war. This is the deeply ingrained model of self-improvement in much of the world. To fix a problem, you must attack it. We believe we must be hard on ourselves, that we must use willpower and criticism as a whip to force ourselves into a better shape. We treat our own inner life as a battlefield, but this approach is itself a pattern, a violent and exhausting loop of self-aversion. It is like trying to put out a fire with gasoline. The wisdom of the path offers a radically different approach, one that requires not force, but tenderness, not war, but reconciliation. This is the art of self-compassion. It is the practice of learning to befriend the very patterns we wish to change. To practice self-compassion, we must first understand what it is, and just as importantly, what it is not. The pioneering researcher Dr. Kristin Neff breaks it down into 3 essential components. The first is self-kindness. This simply means treating ourselves with the same warmth, care, and understanding that we would naturally offer to a dear friend who is suffering. Imagine your closest friend calls you, distraught after making a mistake at work. Would you say to them, "You're such an idiot. You always mess things up"? Of course not. You would offer words of comfort, reassurance, and perspective. Self-kindness is the radical act of turning that same gentle voice inward. It is the opposite of the harsh, relentless inner critic. The second component is a recognition of our common humanity. This is the profound understanding that suffering, failure, and imperfection are not personal defects, but are an unavoidable part of the shared human experience. In moments of pain, our patterns often whisper a story of isolation. Something is uniquely wrong with me. Everyone else has it figured out. This feeling of being alone in our struggle is a primary source of shame. Common humanity is the antidote. It is the realization that countless other people on this planet have felt this same anxiety, this same anger, this same sense of failure. It connects us to others rather than separating us. This insight flows directly from the teaching of no self. If there is no solid, separate self, then our suffering is not a purely personal possession. It is part of the great river of human experience. The third component is mindfulness. We cannot feel compassion for our pain if we are ignoring it or if we are completely swept away by it. Mindfulness, as we have explored, allows us to hold our painful thoughts and feelings in balanced awareness. It allows us to turn toward our suffering with clarity, to say, this is a moment of pain, without being consumed by it. We need mindfulness to see our suffering clearly before we can embrace it with the warmth of kindness and the wisdom of our common humanity. It is crucial to distinguish this healthy self-compassion from its distorted cousins. It is not self-pity. Self-pity is a state of victimhood, a contracting, isolating feeling of poor me that gets lost in the drama of our problems. Self-compassion is a source of strength and resilience. It gives us the emotional stability to face our difficulties, take responsibility, and make positive changes. Nor is it self-indulgence. Self-compassion is not about letting ourselves off the hook or immediately gratifying every whim. It is not saying, "I had a hard day, so I deserve to eat this entire pint of ice cream." True compassion includes a deep wish for our long-term health and well-being. Sometimes, the most compassionate thing we can do for ourselves is the difficult thing: to go for a walk instead of staying on the couch, to have a difficult conversation rather than avoiding it, to say no to a habit that harms us. It is the wise and loving kindness of a good parent, not the permission of a careless one. The primary obstacle to this practice is the powerful voice of our own inner critic. This is the internal narrator that never rests, the judge that presides over the courtroom in our mind. Its voice is likely familiar to you. It is the voice that says, "You've done it again," when a pattern repeats. "You're lazy," when you feel tired. "You're not smart enough," when you face a challenge. This critic is often an echo, an internalized version of the critical voices of parents, teachers, or a demanding society. It believes its job is to motivate us through fear and shame. It thinks that by whipping us, it is keeping us safe and pushing us to succeed. It is a security guard who has mistaken its function, creating a prison of fear instead of a haven of safety. This inner critic is the voice of our karmic patterns. It is the energy of aversion, dosa, turned inward. It is the very mechanism that fires the second arrow. Trying to fight the critic with more self-judgment is like two mirrors facing each other, creating an infinite reflection of suffering. The only way to disarm the critic is to meet its harshness with the soft, unwavering warmth of compassion. So how do we do this in practice? How do we befriend a pattern when it arises? The process is simple. gentle, and can be learned. The next time you feel the familiar grip of a difficult paterna surge of anxiety, a flash of anger, the voice of the critic, begin with this. First, just pause. Before you react, before you get lost in the story, just stop for a single breath. This is the moment of mindfulness. Second, name what you are feeling and offer a gentle touch. You can say to yourself, silently, this is anxiety, or this is pain, or the critic is here. This act of naming creates a space between you and the feeling. Then, do something physically soothing. Place a hand over your heart, or gently cup your face in your hands. This simple physical gesture is not trivial. It activates the caregiving system in our nervous system, releasing hormones like oxytocin that help us feel safe and cared for. Third, offer yourself words of kindness. Speak to yourself as you would to that dear friend. It can feel awkward at first, but it is a powerful practice. You might say, this is a moment of suffering. It's okay. This is really hard right now. Or simply, may I be kind to myself in this moment. The words are less important than the intention of warmth and care behind them. Fourth, consciously remember your common humanity. Remind yourself, I am not alone in this feeling. Many people struggle with this. This is part of what it means to be human. Feel the way this simple reminder loosens the knot of shame and isolation. The goal of this practice is not to make the difficult feeling instantly vanish. The goal is to change your entire relationship to it. You are shifting from being the victim of the storm to being the compassionate witness holding the lantern. There is a beautiful story about how the Buddha dealt with Mara, a figure in Buddhist mythology who represents temptation, distraction, and all the forces that obstruct our path to awakening, in essence, our inner demons and patterns. When Mara would appear before the Buddha, ready to attack him with armies of fear or lure him with visions of desire, the Buddha would not fight back. He would not run away. He would not pretend Mara wasn't there. He would simply look at him and say, with calm and complete recognition, I see you, Mara. He would then, according to some stories, invite Mara to sit down and have tea with him. By acknowledging the demon, by treating him not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a guest to be received, the Buddha disarmed him completely. Mara's power was in the struggle, in the fear he created. Met with fearless, open-hearted compassion, his power dissolved. Our patterns are our Mara. Our anxiety is Mara. Our inner critic is Mara. The invitation of this path is to learn how to stop fighting our demons and, instead, to learn how to offer them tea. This profound practice of befriending the difficult parts of ourselves is the foundation for a truly compassionate life. When we can learn to offer kindness to our own anxiety, we can look at an anxious person with genuine empathy rather than judgment. When we can hold our own failures with tenderness, we can meet the failures of others with understanding. This inner work naturally radiates outward. It prepares us to see the world not as a collection of good people and bad people, but as a vast community of beings, all of whom are struggling with their own patterns, all of whom are yearning for happiness, and all of whom are worthy of compassion. The art of self-compassion is a homecoming. It is the gentle practice of offering tea to our inner demons, of learning to hold our own pain with the tenderness we would offer a friend. This inner transformation, this shift from self-criticism to self-kindness, inevitably begins to change the way we see the world. The warmth we cultivate for ourselves starts to radiate outward. Once we have learned to look at our own patterns, our anger, our fear, our greed with a wise and forgiving eye, we can no longer look upon the difficult behavior of others in the same old way. We begin to understand that the world is not divided into good people and bad people, the enlightened and the ignorant. Instead, we see a world filled with fellow beings, each one, like us, struggling with their own inner demons, each one caught in the grip of their own karmic patterns, and each one fundamentally yearning for happiness and freedom from suffering. This is the beginning of true, boundless compassion. Our default mode of operation is to take everything personally. When someone is rude to us, when a loved one is critical, when a colleague is dismissive, our immediate and unquestioned assumption is that their action is fundamentally about us. We believe we are the target of a deliberate, personal attack. This perception instantly triggers our own defensive patterns, our own inner Mara. The poison of aversion flares up as anger or resentment. We feel the sting of hurt, the shame of not being good enough. We might lash out in return, withdraw into a wounded silence, or spend days replaying the incident in our minds, building a case against the other person. From this perspective, the other person is an adversary, an obstacle to our happiness. Life becomes a strategic and exhausting game of defending our territory, managing threats, and nursing our wounds. This egocentric view, rooted in the illusion of a solid and separate self that must be protected at all costs, is a guaranteed recipe for a life of conflict and unhappiness. The wisdom we have cultivated offers a radical and liberating alternative. It gives us a new lens through which to see. It allows us to look at a difficult person and see not a monster, but a fellow being who is suffering. When someone explodes in anger, instead of seeing a personal attack, we can learn to see a person overwhelmed by the poison of aversion. We can recognize the immense pain, fear, and powerlessness that fuels such an outburst. We can see that they are caught in a storm and we just happen to be standing in the rain. When we encounter someone who is arrogant, boastful, and constantly needs to be the center of attention, our old pattern might be to feel annoyance and judgment. But with this new lens, we can see a being in the grip of the poison of greed, desperately grasping for external validation to soothe a deep inner poverty. Their arrogance is not a sign of their strength, but a symptom of their suffering. When we meet someone who expresses ignorant or hateful views, instead of reacting with pure hatred, we can see a being lost in the dense fog of delusion, their mind conditioned by fear and misinformation. It is absolutely critical to understand that this does not mean we excuse or condone harmful behavior. Compassion is not about becoming a doormat. It is not about saying that hurtful actions are okay. We can, and often must, set firm boundaries. We can say no to unacceptable behavior. We can protect ourselves and even remove ourselves from toxic situations. The difference is that we can do so from a place of clarity and sad wisdom, rather than from a place of reactive hatred. We can diagnose the illness without hating the patient. This shift is monumental. It frees us from the heavy, poisonous burden of resentment and bitterness. We stop carrying the pain of other people's actions as a personal wound. We can act to protect ourselves without planting new karmic seeds of hatred in our own minds. This compassionate view is built upon two pillars, two qualities of the heart that can be actively cultivated. The first is metta, which is often translated as loving kindness. Metta is the sincere, unconditional wish for all beings to be happy and to have the causes of happiness. It is a feeling of warm, open-hearted friendliness that we can extend not just to our loved ones, but to neutral people, and even to those we find difficult. It is the quiet, internal whisper of may you be well, may you be peaceful, may you be happy. Practicing metta is a direct antidote to the poison of aversion. It softens the hard edges of our judgments and dissolves the walls of separation between ourselves and others. It is the recognition of our common humanity, our shared desire for joy. The second pillar is karuna, which is compassion. If metta is the wish for others to be happy, karuna is the wish for them to be free from suffering. It is the heart's natural response to seeing pain. It is not pity, which looks down on another's suffering, but a feeling of shared humanity that says, I understand this pain. Karuna is what arises when we look past someone's harmful behavior and see the suffering that is driving it. It is what allows us to look at an angry person and think, this being is in so much pain. May they be free from the anger that torments them. Karuna is what prevents our heart from closing in the face of difficulty. It is the tender courage to stay present with suffering, both our own and others. There is perhaps no story that illustrates the transformative power of this compassion more than that of Angulimala. Angulimala was a feared serial killer who terrorized the countryside. His name literally meant garland of fingers because he wore a necklace made from the fingers of his many victims. He was the embodiment of hatred, violence, and delusion. Entire villages would empty when he was near. One day, the Buddha learned of Angulimala and, to the horror of his disciples, began walking calmly down the road toward the killer's territory. Angulimala saw the Buddha approaching and was astonished. Everyone else ran from him, but this lone monk was walking toward him. He shouted at the Buddha to stop, but the Buddha kept walking calmly. Angulimala, enraged, began to run after him, but though he ran with all his might, he could not catch up to the Buddha, who continued to walk at a normal pace. Exasperated, Angulimala screamed, "Stop, monk." The Buddha turned and said, "I have stopped, Angulimala. It is you who have not." He explained that he had stopped creating violence, stopped harming beings, stopped planting the seeds of suffering. Angulimala was still running, caught on the endless wheel of his own hatred. The Buddha's complete lack of fear and the immense power of his compassion, his ability to see not just a monster, but a profoundly lost and suffering human being, shattered Angulimala's defenses. He threw down his weapons, bowed at the Buddha's feet, and in time became a monk who dedicated the rest of his life to peace, eventually becoming fully enlightened. This story shows us the ultimate potential of compassion. It is not a weak or passive state. It is a fearless and transformative power. It is the ability to see the potential for goodness and peace, even in the heart of darkness. While we may not encounter a figure as dramatic as Angulimala, we encounter his lesser cousins every day, in the driver who lays on the horn, in the partner who speaks a cruel word, in the inner critic that whispers poison in our own ear. The path of compassion invites us to see all of these as manifestations of suffering, and to meet them not with more violence, but with the radical, disarming power of a kind and understanding heart. We have now journeyed through the inner landscapes of our minds, learning to see our patterns, understanding their karmic roots, and cultivating the gentle attitudes of mindfulness and compassion. We have gathered the essential tools. We have the what and the why. The journey now turns toward the how. How do we assemble all of these profound insights into a single, coherent, and practical roadmap for liberation? This leads us to the very first teaching the Buddha gave after his enlightenment, the elegant and complete framework that contains the entirety of the path, the Four Noble Truths. Having gathered our tools of mindfulness and compassion, and having gained a profound new perspective through the wisdom of impermanence and no self, we arrive at a pivotal point. We have the individual insights, but how do they fit together? How do we organize them into a systematic, reliable path that leads from the tangled confusion of our patterns to a state of genuine freedom? For this, we turn to the very first sermon the Buddha delivered after his awakening. This is the blueprint for the entire journey, a framework so elegant and so complete that it has been the foundation of Buddhist practice for over 2,500 years. This framework is the Four Noble Truths. It is common for those new to this wisdom to hear the first noble truth, the truth of suffering, and mistake it for a pessimistic or negative worldview. But this is a profound misunderstanding. The Buddha was not a pessimist. He was a pragmatist. He is often called the Great Physician, and the Four Noble Truths are best understood not as a set of beliefs to be adopted, but as a medical diagnosis for the human condition. They are a clear, logical, and empowering method for healing. A doctor who fails to diagnose an illness or who downplays its severity is not a compassionate doctor. A truly compassionate physician looks clearly at the problem, identifies its cause, confirms that a cure is possible, and then prescribes a clear path to recovery. This is precisely what the Buddha does with these four truths. The first noble truth is the doctor's diagnosis of the illness. It is the truth of dukkha. This Pali word is often translated as suffering, but its meaning is far more subtle and comprehensive. It does, of course, include the obvious forms of physical and emotional pain that we all experience: sickness, injury, grief, loss, and the pain of old age and death. But dukkha points to something deeper. It includes a more subtle form of suffering called viparinama dukkha, which is the stress and anxiety that comes from the fact that even pleasant experiences are impermanent. The happiness we feel from a new relationship or a successful project is wonderful, but it is shadowed by the subtle, often unconscious fear that it will end. This clinging to pleasantness in a world of constant change is a source of deep, underlying stress. Most importantly for our purposes, dukkha includes a pervasive, background unsatisfactoriness called sankhara dukkha. This is the inherent stress of being a conditioned being, of being driven by unconscious habits and karmic patterns. It is the feeling of being a puppet on a string, the low-grade friction of a life lived on autopilot. It is the feeling of being stuck in a loop. So, the first noble truth, when applied to our patterns, is this simple, honest, and courageous acknowledgement. There is suffering and unsatisfactoriness in being caught in this repeating pattern. It is the moment we finally stop pretending everything is okay. It is the moment we admit, this anxiety hurts. This cycle of anger is causing pain to me and others. This addiction is making my life unmanageable. This clear diagnosis is not an act of pessimism. It is the essential first step toward any possible cure. The second noble truth is the doctor's identification of the cause of the illness. This is the truth of samudaya, the origin. The Buddha saw that our suffering is not random, nor is it handed down by an external force. It has a specific, identifiable cause. That cause is tanha, a word that translates as thirst, craving, or clinging. This is the obsessive, burning thirst of the ego to get what it wants and get rid of what it doesn't want. It is the deep friction created by our demands on unreality that will never conform to them. This thirst takes three primary forms. First, there is the craving for sense pleasures, the endless pursuit of pleasant sights, sounds, smells, tastes, and feelings. Second, there is the craving to become something, the thirst for existence, which is the deep drive to build, protect, and enhance our ego identity, to become a successful, loved, or powerful person. Third, there is the craving for non-existence, the thirst to annihilate what is unpleasant, to get rid of a painful feeling, a difficult person, or a threatening situation. This is the very engine of our patterns. When we apply this second truth, we see that the cause of the suffering in our pattern is the clinging and craving that fuels it. The pattern of addiction is fueled by the craving for pleasant sensations. The pattern of workaholism is driven by the craving to become a successful and validated person. The pattern of angry outbursts is fueled by the craving to annihilate whatever is frustrating us. The pattern of anxiety is driven by the desperate craving for the feeling of fear to not exist. This is a profound insight. It means the problem is not the external situation, and it is not even the raw feeling itself. The problem is our craving, our reactive clinging and pushing away. This is the cause of the illness. The third noble truth is the doctor's prognosis. It is the truth of Nirodha, the cessation of suffering. This is the great message of hope on the path. The Buddha declared that because suffering has a cause, if that cause can be eliminated, the suffering will end. Our state of being trapped in patterns is not a life sentence. Freedom is possible. Nirodha means to extinguish, like blowing out a candle. It refers to the state of nibbana, in which the fires of greed, hatred, and delusion, the fires of craving, have been completely extinguished. This is not a distant heaven to be attained after death. It is a state of profound peace, unshakable freedom, and deep wisdom that can be realized right here, in this very life. When applied to our patterns, the third truth states, it is possible to be free from the suffering of this loop. There is a state of peace and freedom available when the craving that fuels the pattern is extinguished. This prognosis gives us the inspiration and the courage to undertake the treatment. The fourth noble truth is the doctor's prescription. It is the truth of Magga, the path. A good doctor does not just say, you have an illness, it has a cause, and a cure is possible. They provide a clear, detailed, step-by-step treatment plan. This is exactly what the Buddha did. He laid out a practical, comprehensive, and gradual training for the mind that leads directly to the cessation of suffering. This is the Noble Eightfold Path. It is a set of 8 interconnected factors that cover every aspect of our lives, grouped into 3 essential trainings: the training in wisdom, the training in ethical conduct, and the training in mental discipline. The fourth truth, applied to our patterns, is therefore the way to extinguish the craving and free ourselves from this pattern is to follow a practical 8-part path of practice. This is the how-to manual for our own liberation. It is not based on blind faith, but on active training and personal verification. So, we have the complete diagnosis from the great physician. First, the acknowledgement of the illness. Being caught in our patterns causes suffering. Second, the identification of the cause. This suffering is caused by our own craving and clinging. Third, the hopeful prognosis. Because there is a cause, a cure is possible. A state of freedom can be attained. And fourth, the detailed prescription. This cure is achieved by diligently following the Noble Eightfold Path. This framework is not a set of dogmas, but a call to action. It invites us to become an active participant in our own healing. The first 3 truths have given us our map, our understanding of the terrain. Now, with the fourth noble truth as our guide, we will begin to walk the path. We will unpack the doctor's prescription, one element at a time, beginning with the very foundation upon which the entire path is built, the cultivation of wisdom. Having received the doctor's profound diagnosis in the form of the 4 noble truths, we now hold the prescription for our own healing. This prescription is the Noble Eightfold Path, the practical, step-by-step guide to walking ourselves out of the wilderness of our own conditioned patterns and into the clearing of freedom. It is important to understand that these 8 factors are not a linear sequence of steps to be completed one after the other. Rather, they are like the intertwined strands of a single, strong rope. Each strand supports and strengthens all the others. To cultivate one is to cultivate them all. They are to be developed simultaneously, creating a holistic transformation of our entire being. Traditionally, these 8 factors are grouped into 3 essential trainings: the training in ethical conduct, the training in mental discipline, and the training in wisdom. Our exploration begins with the foundation of wisdom, for without a clear and accurate map of the territory, our journey can become aimless and confused. We might meditate for years or adhere to strict ethical codes, but without wisdom, our efforts may not lead to true liberation. The wisdom training consists of the first 2 factors of the path: right understanding and right thought. Together, they are the compass and the rudder for our journey, ensuring that our efforts are always oriented toward the correct destination, the end of suffering. The very first factor, The bedrock of the entire path is right understanding, or samadhi. This is sometimes translated as right view, and it is the correct lens through which we learn to see ourselves and the world. It is essential to understand that this is not about acquiring a set of beliefs or memorizing philosophical doctrines. One can be an expert in Buddhist philosophy and still have very little right understanding. It is the difference between having a detailed map of a country and actually having walked its roads, climbed its mountains, and swum in its rivers. The map is intellectual knowledge. The direct experience is wisdom. Right understanding is the gradual process of transforming the map of the teachings into our own direct, lived insight. It is the direct antidote to the third of the three poisons, delusion, the fundamental ignorance that keeps us trapped. So, what does it mean to have right understanding? It means seeing reality as it truly is, free from the distortions of our fears and desires. It has several key layers. The most foundational layer is a deep, practical understanding of the law of karma. This is not the simplistic idea of cosmic retribution we discussed earlier, but the profound recognition that our volitional actions, our intentions, have consequences. Wholesome intentions rooted in kindness, clarity, and generosity naturally lead to peace and happiness. Unwholesome intentions rooted in greed, hatred, and delusion naturally lead to suffering and conflict. This is not a moral commandment handed down from on high. It is a natural law. Understanding this gives us a powerful internal motivation to live an ethical life. We choose kindness not because we are supposed to, but because we understand it is a direct cause of our own well-being. This understanding gives us a sense of radical responsibility for our lives. We are not the victims of a random universe. We are the heirs and creators of our own experience. The next layer of right understanding is the full comprehension of the Four Noble Truths themselves. The path has a beautifully recursive quality. The very framework of the path is also the object of its deepest understanding. To truly see in our own bones that being caught in a pattern causes stress, that the cause of this stress is our own craving, that an end to this stress is possible, and that the eightfold path is the way to that end. This very seeing is right understanding. It is the lens we use to diagnose our own suffering in real time. When a difficult pattern arises, we can see it through this framework. Here is the dukkha, here is the craving that fuels it. I know freedom from this is possible. I will apply the path. It becomes our constant guide and reference point. The deepest and most transformative layer of right understanding is the direct, experiential insight into the three marks of existence. These are the three fundamental characteristics of all conditioned phenomena. We have touched upon them, but now we see them as the core content of wisdom. First is anicca, impermanence, the direct seeing that everything in our experience, from our body to our thoughts, is in a constant state of flux. Second is dukkha, unsatisfactoriness, the clear seeing that trying to cling to or find ultimate, lasting satisfaction in anything that is impermanent is doomed to fail and will always result in a subtle or gross form of suffering. And third is anatta, no self, the direct seeing that within this ever-changing stream of body and mind, there is no solid, separate, unchanging I to be found. To see these three truths directly, not just as ideas, but as the living texture of reality, is what it means to have a fully developed right understanding. This is the wisdom that cuts the root of delusion. When we apply this to our patterns, their power begins to unravel. Right understanding of karma shows us that our pattern of anxiety is not a random flaw in our personality, but the ripening of past seeds of fear, which means we have the power to plant new seeds of peace. Right understanding of the Four Noble Truths provides the clear method for working with that anxiety, and right understanding of the three marks of existence allows us to see the anxiety itself as an impermanent, unsatisfactory, and selfless process. It is just weather passing through the vast sky of awareness. It is not me, it is not mine. This depersonalization robs the pattern of its authority. Right understanding is the compass that shows us the true north of liberation. But a compass alone does not move the ship. We must also actively steer the ship in that direction. This is the function of the second factor of the path, right thought or right intention, samma sankappa. If right understanding is the seeing, right intention is the willing. It is the conscious and deliberate resolution to align our inner life, our thoughts, our motives, our aspirations with the wisdom we are cultivating. It is the heart's response to the mind's clarity. It is about actively purifying the intentions that drive our speech and actions, moving away from the three poisons and towards their wholesome opposites. The Buddha outlined three specific forms of right intention. The first is the intention of renunciation. For many in the modern world, the word renunciation sounds grim and joyless. It conjures images of self-denial and hardship. But this is a misunderstanding. The Pali word, nekama, is better understood as the intention of letting go. It is the wise recognition that clinging to fleeting pleasures and outcomes is a source of stress, and the gentle resolve to release our tight grip. It is not about hating the world or rejecting its beauty. It is about finding a deeper, more reliable form of well-being that is not dependent on whether things are going our way. In the context of our patterns, this is a crucial intention. It is the resolve to let go of the secondary gain, the subtle payoff that each pattern provides. For a pattern of anger, it's the intention to let go of the intoxicating but poisonous feeling of self-righteousness. For an addiction, it's the intention to let go of the momentary but ultimately destructive comfort it provides. It is the choice to trade a fleeting, low-quality pleasure for a deep and lasting peace. The second form of right intention is the intention of goodwill or loving kindness. This is the direct antidote to the poison of aversion and ill will. It is the conscious resolution to meet every being, including ourselves, with a heart of warmth and friendliness. It is the deliberate cultivation of thoughts of metta. This means that when we notice thoughts of irritation, resentment, or judgment arising, we recognize them, and we intentionally replace them with a wish for well-being. When someone cuts us off in traffic, instead of feeding the flash of anger, we can take a breath and cultivate the thought, "May you be safe, may you be at peace." When our own inner critic attacks us for a mistake, we can meet that harsh voice with the gentle intention, "May I be kind to myself, may I learn from this." This practice of actively cultivating goodwill softens our heart, dissolves our resentments, and transforms our inner world from a battlefield into a sanctuary. The third form is the intention of harmlessness, or compassion. This is the direct antidote to cruelty, aggression, and the desire to cause pain. It is the intention of avihisa, rooted in the deep empathy of karuna. It arises from the understanding that all beings, without exception, share a fundamental wish to be free from suffering. The intention of harmlessness is the resolve to live our lives in a way that minimizes the harm we cause, both to others and to ourselves. It is the conscious choice to abandon actions and words that are born from a desire to hurt, punish, or dominate. When it comes to our patterns, this intention is transformative. It means recognizing that our self-destructive habits are a form of violence against ourselves, and we resolve to stop. It means seeing that our reactive anger harms others, and we resolve to find a more skillful way to communicate. The intention of harmlessness is the vow to become a source of safety and peace in the world, starting with the person we have the most power over, ourselves. Together, right understanding and right intention form the wisdom section of the path. They are the clear seeing and the noble aspiring. Right understanding is the eye that sees the destination. Right intention is the heart that yearns to go there. They provide the guidance and the motivation for everything else we do. But wisdom alone, if it does not translate into our actual behavior, remains sterile. A beautiful map and a heartfelt desire to travel are of little use if we do not actually begin to sail the ship with skill and care. Our inner clarity must now begin to shape our outer world. This leads us directly to the next great training on the path, the training in ethical conduct, where we learn to manifest our wisdom through our speech, our actions, and our livelihood. The wisdom of right understanding has given us our map, and the aspiration of right intention has set the direction of our heart. We see clearly where we need to go, and we have cultivated the will to get there. But this inner clarity and noble aspiration must inevitably meet the world. They must be translated from the internal realm of thought into the external world of action. This is the function of the next stage of the training, the great division of the path known as sila, or ethical conduct. This training is comprised of 3 factors: right speech, right action, and right livelihood. It is easy to mistake this part of the path for a set of restrictive, moralistic rules handed down to limit our freedom. But this is not the case. Sila is not an external code imposed upon us. It is the natural, joyful expression of a wise and compassionate heart. It is the practice of aligning our behavior with our deepest understanding of non-harming. The function of this ethical training is twofold. First, and most obviously, it protects others and ourselves from the harm caused by unskillful behavior. Second, and just as important for our journey, it creates the foundation for a calm and peaceful mind. A life filled with dishonesty, conflict, and remorse creates a turbulent, agitated mind. Such a mind is like muddy water, incapable of the stillness and clarity required for deep meditation and insight. By cleaning up our act, we create an inner environment of peace and self-respect, which is the essential groundwork for the deeper stages of mental training. We begin with right speech, or samavacha, because our words are one of the most powerful and frequent ways we interact with the world. Every day, we wield the power to create peace or conflict, clarity or confusion with what we say. Right speech is the art of using this power skillfully. It is traditionally broken down into 4 aspects. The first is abstaining from false speech. This means more than simply avoiding outright lies. It includes the subtle deceptions we engage in daily, exaggerating our accomplishments, making promises we don't intend to keep, giving insincere compliments, or telling white lies to avoid minor discomfort. Each small act of dishonesty complicates our inner world, forcing us to remember the lies we've told and creating a fear of being discovered. A pattern of dishonesty creates a fragile and anxious mind. The practice of right speech is the commitment to truthfulness, to speaking in a way that is reliable and straightforward. This practice simplifies our lives and builds a foundation of inner integrity. The second aspect is abstaining from divisive speech. This is speech that is intended to drive a wedge between people, to create disharmony and conflict. It is the poison of gossip, the act of speaking ill of someone who is not present. It is spreading rumors, whether we know them to be true or not. It is using words to set one person against another. This pattern is often fueled by our own insecurity or ill will, an attempt to build ourselves up by tearing others down. It creates a world of distrust and fractured relationships. The practice here is to use our words to encourage harmony and reconciliation, to speak of others' good qualities, and to refuse to participate in the casual cruelty of gossip. The third aspect is abstaining from harsh speech. This is the weaponization of our words. It includes shouting, cursing, insults, name-calling, and cruel, biting sarcasm. It is speech that is intended to wound, dominate, or belittle another person. It is the direct vocal expression of the poison of aversion. A pattern of harsh speech leaves a trail of emotional damage, both in others and in ourselves, as it reinforces our own tendencies toward anger and cruelty. The practice of right speech is to consciously cultivate a way of speaking that is gentle, kind, and considerate. Even when we must communicate something difficult or deliver criticism, we can do so with a gentle tone, with words carefully chosen to minimize harm and preserve the dignity of the other person. The fourth and final aspect is abstaining from idle chatter. This is speech that is aimless and serves no real purpose. It is the endless talk about trivial matters, the pointless commentary, the noise we use to fill empty space. While it may seem harmless, constant idle chatter keeps the mind in a state of agitation and superficiality. It dissipates our precious mental energy and prevents us from settling into a state of deeper contemplation. The practice here is not to become grimly silent, but to use our speech with intention. It is to ask ourselves, is what I am about to say true? Is it kind? Is it beneficial? Is it the right time to say it? This practice cultivates a respect for silence and a mind that is less cluttered and more focused. From speech, we move to our physical behaviors with right action or samakamanta. This is the practice of aligning our bodily actions with our intention of harmlessness. It also has three traditional components. First is abstaining from taking life. At its most fundamental level, this is a commitment to not kill or physically harm any living creature. It is a cultivation of a reverence for all life. In the context of our own patterns, this can also be understood as a commitment to stop doing violence to ourselves through self-harming behaviors or deeply destructive habits that damage our physical well-being. Second is abstaining from taking what is not given. This is the practice of refraining from stealing, but its scope is much broader than just theft. It includes taking credit for work that someone else did, using office supplies for personal use, wasting time when we are being paid to work, or exploiting others for financial gain. It is about cultivating a deep sense of honesty and integrity in all our dealings. Patterns rooted in greed and a sense of lack often manifest as a failure to practice this form of right action. The practice is to cultivate generosity and contentment, to be happy with what we have legitimately earned. Third is abstaining from sexual misconduct. This practice is about bringing our core intentions of kindness and harmlessness into our sexual relationships. It means refraining from any sexual act that involves coercion, exploitation, deception, or causes harm to ourselves or others. It is about ensuring that our sexual expression is rooted in mutual respect, care, and honesty, rather than being driven solely by craving without regard for the consequences. So many of our most painful repeating patterns in relationships are born from a failure to bring this ethical mindfulness into this powerful and intimate area of our lives. Finally, the training of sila includes right livelihood, or sama aiva. This is the application of right speech and right action to the way we earn our living. Since we dedicate such a large portion of our lives to our work, this is a critical field for practice. Right livelihood means engaging in a profession that does not cause harm to others and, ideally, contributes to their well-being. Traditionally, this meant avoiding occupations like being a weapons dealer, a butcher, a slave trader, or a seller of poisons and intoxicants. In our modern world, we might see this as avoiding work that is based on deception, such as false advertising, on exploitation, such as predatory lending, or on causing widespread harm, such as manufacturing toxic products or spreading online misinformation. The reality for many of us is that we may not have complete freedom to choose a perfectly ethical profession. The practice, then, is to bring as much ethical intention as we can into the work we already do. Can we be more honest with our customers? Can we treat our co-workers with greater kindness and less gossip? Can we refuse to participate in the most harmful or deceptive aspects of our industry? Right livelihood is not about having a perfect job, but about performing our work with a perfect intention, the intention to create benefit and to cause no harm. Together, these three factors, right speech, right action, and right livelihood form the training in ethical conduct. They are the ways we manifest our inner wisdom in the outer world. By committing to this training, we stop planting new karmic seeds of harm and remorse. We purify our actions, and, in doing so, we create a mind that is calm, bright, and unburdened by guilt. A mind that is stable and at ease is now properly prepared for the deepest work of transformation. This clean and peaceful foundation allows us to undertake the final stage of the training, the cultivation of a focused, powerful, and insightful mind through the practice of mental discipline. Our journey along the Eightfold Path has brought us through the illuminating domain of wisdom and the grounding practice of ethical conduct. We have cultivated a clear view of our destination and have aligned our outward actions to create a life of harmlessness and integrity. This clean, ethical life creates a profound sense of inner peace and freedom from remorse, providing the stable foundation upon which the final, great structure of the path can be built. We now arrive at the third essential training, samadhi, or mental discipline. This is the heart of the meditative path. It is where we move from understanding the mind to actively retraining and mastering it. If wisdom is knowing how a garden should be tended, and ethics is the act of putting up a fence to protect it, mental discipline is the direct, hands-on work of cultivating the soil, removing the weeds, and nurturing the flowers. This training consists of the final three factors of the path: right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. The first of these, right effort, or samavayama, is perhaps one of the most practical and empowering aspects of the entire path. It is the opposite of spiritual passivity. It is not about waiting for enlightenment to strike, but about actively engaging in the process of our own purification. The word effort here should not be mistaken for a grim, joyless struggle or a tense, forceful striving. It is a skillful, balanced, and wise application of energy, like a master musician tuning an instrument, not too tight, not too loose. Right effort is the conscious and energetic will to become the skillful gardener of our own mind. This skillful gardening is traditionally described as a fourfold practice. The first of the four great efforts is to prevent the arising of unwholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the practice of wise prevention. It is learning to recognize the triggers and conditions that tend to give rise to our negative patterns. We learn to become a wise gatekeeper of our senses. If we know that scrolling through a particular social media feed consistently sparks feelings of envy and inadequacy, right effort means choosing to limit our exposure to it. If we know that engaging in conversations about a certain political topic with a certain person always ends in anger, right effort might mean skillfully steering the conversation to safer ground. This is not about hiding from the world in fear, but about wisely managing our environment to protect the mind from unnecessary toxins, especially in the early stages of our practice. It is the simple wisdom of not planting the seeds of weeds if we can avoid it. The second effort is to abandon unwholesome states that have already arisen. This is the work we must do when our preventative measures have failed, or when a karmic seed from the past ripens unexpectedly. A moment of mindfulness reveals that an unwholesome statey surge of greed, a wave of resentment, the familiar voice of the inner criticist now present in the mind. The unskillful reaction is to either indulge it or to violently suppress it. Right effort is the middle path. It is the skillful application of an antidote. If anger has arisen, we can make the effort to deliberately bring a thought of loving kindness to mind. If we are lost in anxious thoughts, we can make the effort to return our attention firmly to the physical sensation of the breath. We can investigate the unwholesome state, seeing its impermanent and selfless nature, which robs it of its power. This effort is the practice of not watering the weed once it has sprouted, allowing it to wither and die from lack of nourishment. The third effort is to arouse wholesome states that have not yet arisen. This is the proactive side of the practice. It is not enough to simply avoid the negative. We must actively cultivate the positive. This is the conscious act of planting flowers in our garden. It means setting aside time for practices that generate states of peace, joy, and compassion. It is making the effort to sit in formal meditation, even for just a few minutes a day. It is the effort to read inspiring texts, to listen to wise teachings, or to reflect on themes like gratitude and generosity. It is the choice to perform a small act of kindness which plants a beautiful seed in our own heart. This effort ensures that our mental garden does not just become empty, but becomes filled with beauty and fragrance. The fourth and final effort is to maintain and perfect wholesome states that have already arisen when, through our practice, a wholesome state of mind does arise a feeling of calm, a moment of focused clarity, a surge of compassion. We often do one of two things. We either get excited and grasp at it, which ironically makes it disappear, or we don't notice it at all and it passes quickly. This fourth effort is the skill of sustaining and nurturing these positive states. It means learning to rest in a state of calm without becoming complacent. It means appreciating a moment of joy without clinging to it. It is the gentle effort to stay with the wholesome state, to let it permeate our being, to allow it to grow and stabilize. This practice strengthens the wholesome pathways in our brain, making it easier for these states to arise in the future. This entire fourfold practice of right effort is powered and guided by the central faculty of the path, right mindfulness, or sama sati. We have met mindfulness before, but here we see it in its full context as the seventh factor of the path. It is the linchpin that holds the entire practice together. Without mindfulness, right effort is impossible. How can we prevent an unwholesome state if we are not mindful enough to see its triggers? How can we abandon anger if we are not even aware that we are angry until after we have shouted? How can we cultivate joy if we are not mindful of the small, beautiful moments that present themselves? Right mindfulness is the bare, non-judgmental awareness of what is happening in our inner and outer world, moment by moment. It is the watchful gatekeeper that impartially observes everything that comes and goes through the doors of our mind. The classical teaching on mindfulness practice is laid out in the 4 foundations of mindfulness. These are 4 domains of experience where we can apply our mindful attention. The first is mindfulness of the body. This includes paying attention to the breath, not as a concept, but as a direct physical sensation. It includes being aware of our posture, whether we are sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. It is the practice of bringing awareness to our daily activities, like eating, drinking, or washing our hands, transforming them from unconscious routines into opportunities for presence. This practice is a powerful anchor. It pulls us out of the turbulent fantasies of the past and future and grounds us in the solid, tangible reality of the present moment. The second foundation is mindfulness of feelings. This is the direct, moment-to-moment observation of the feeling tone of our experience. As we go through our day, every single experience, whether from an external sense or an internal thought, is accompanied by a feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. This practice involves simply noticing these feeling tones as they arise and pass away, without getting caught in our habitual reaction to them. It is here that we directly witness the second noble truth in action. We see our deep-seated tendency to cling to the pleasant, to push away the unpleasant, and to ignore the neutral. By simply watching this process without reacting, we begin to untangle the deep knot of craving that causes our suffering. The third foundation is mindfulness of the mind, or consciousness itself. This is the practice of observing the overall state of our mind at any given moment. We learn to recognize, without judgment, the mind has greed right now, or the mind is free from greed. The mind is scattered, or the mind is concentrated. The mind is contracted with fear, or the mind is open and expansive. By observing these mind states as impersonal phenomena, we break our habit of identifying with them. We are no longer an angry person. We are the awareness that is temporarily experiencing a mind state of anger. This directly cultivates the wisdom of know, self. The fourth and final foundation is mindfulness of dhammas, or mental objects. This is the most analytical aspect of the practice, where we observe our experience through the clarifying lens of the teachings themselves. We might watch our experience arise and pass away in terms of the 5 aggregates, or we might observe how the 3 poisons are operating in our mind in real time. We might see a moment of craving and recognize it as the cause of suffering. This foundation is where mindfulness and wisdom merge, leading to profound insight into the nature of reality. As we diligently apply right effort and right mindfulness, the mind naturally begins to settle and unify. This leads to the 8th and final factor of the path, right concentration, or samma samadhi. If mindfulness is the act of continually bringing the wandering mind back to a single point, concentration is the result, the state of the mind staying firmly fixed on that point. It is the development of a unified, unshakable focus. An unconcentrated mind is like a flickering candle in the wind, weak and scattered. A concentrated mind is like a powerful, focused laser beam. This concentrated mind is not an end in itself. Its power is instrumental. It is this focused energy that allows the wisdom of right understanding to penetrate the deepest layers of delusion. It is the sharp scalpel that can finally cut the root of suffering. The practice of concentration often involves focusing on a single object, such as the breath, to the exclusion of all else. As concentration deepens, it can lead to profound states of meditative absorption, known as the jhanas. These are states of immense bliss, tranquility, and peace, born not of sense pleasures, but of a pure and unified mind. These states are powerful because they show us, through direct experience, that an extraordinary happiness is available to us that is completely independent of the chaotic outer world. This experience naturally weakens the grip of our craving for worldly pleasures. The 3 factors of mental discipline, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration work together as a team. Effort provides the energy, mindfulness provides the knowing, and concentration provides the stability. Together, they create a mind that is both supple and strong, both peaceful and powerful, a mind that is truly fit for the work of liberation. This is the culmination of the training. A mind so trained, guided by wisdom and expressed through ethical action, is no longer a prisoner of its past conditioning. It is a mind that has woken up to its own potential for boundless freedom, compassion, and peace. We have walked the high mountain path of philosophy and delved into the deep inner work of meditative training. Now, we bring this entire body of wisdom to the place where it is most needed, most challenged, and most transformative. The messy, beautiful, and often painful domain of our relationships. Our interactions with others, especially our intimate partners, are the crucible where our practice is truly tested. They are the field where the seeds of our past karma ripen most vividly, and where our unconscious patterns play out in high definition. A relationship can be a karmic mirror, reflecting back to us with perfect, unflinching clarity our deepest insecurities, our unhealed wounds, and our most stubborn attachments. The intense pull of attraction, the consuming fire of conflict, these are not random occurrences. They are often signs that a profound lesson is presenting itself, an opportunity to finally break a cycle that has followed us for a lifetime. Before we can change this cycle, we must first recognize it. Does the story of your relational life have a familiar plot? Perhaps you find yourself consistently drawn to the same type of personte, emotionally distant partner who makes you feel you must constantly strive for their affection, or the volatile partner whose drama provides a strange sense of intensity and purpose. Perhaps you are always cast in the same role, the rescuer, always trying to fix a broken person, or the pleaser, always abandoning your own needs to keep the peace. Look at the arguments that repeat, relationship after relationship. Are they always about the same core issues of trust, commitment, money, or freedom? Do you experience a recurring cycle of passionate idealization, where you believe you have finally found the one, only for it to be followed by a bitter and crushing disappointment when their humanity inevitably emerges? If any of this feels familiar, know that you are not alone. This is the nature of a karmic pattern. We are unconsciously trying to resolve an old pain in a new context. We are casting a new actor in an old play, hoping that this time the ending will be different. A woman who had a cold and withholding father may unconsciously seek out emotionally unavailable men, reenacting the drama of her childhood in a futile attempt to finally win the love she never received. A man who grew up in a chaotic home may find himself drawn to unstable partners because the intensity of the drama feels familiar, more like home than the quiet of a peaceful partnership. We are not choosing this pain consciously. We are driven by the echoes of our past, by the parts of ourselves that are still wounded and seeking resolution. The only way to step out of the play is to see it for what it is. For this, we can use the Buddha's own diagnostic tool, the Four Noble Truths, as a lens to understand our relational suffering. The first noble truth is the honest diagnosis. There is suffering in this pattern of relating. We must begin by courageously admitting the truth to ourselves, without blame. The way I engage in relationships is causing me pain. This cycle of anxiety, conflict, and disappointment is a profound form of suffering. This is not working. This honest acknowledgement is not an act of failure. It is an act of profound self-respect. It is the moment we stop pretending and finally decide to seek a cure. The second noble truth is the identification of the cause. The origin of this suffering is my own craving and attachment. This is the most difficult and most empowering step. Our instinct is to blame the other person. If only they would change, we think, then I would be happy. But the Buddha's teaching directs our gaze inward. The true source of the suffering is not the other person's behavior, but our own internal clinging. It is the craving for validation, the deep thirst to have another person see us, complete us, and make us feel whole. It is our attachment to a fantasy, a rigid idea of what the relationship should look like, and the anger we feel when reality doesn't conform to it. It is our aversion to loneliness, a fear so powerful it can make us cling to a deeply unhealthy situation. It is the core delusion that another person holds the key to the lock of our own happiness. They do not. The key is, and always has been, in our own pocket. The third noble truth is the hopeful prognosis. Freedom from this relational suffering is possible. This is the promise that we do not have to live this way forever. There exists a state of nirvana, a cessation of the clinging and craving that fuel our pain. It is possible to relate to others from a place of wholeness, not emptiness. It is possible to love without possessive attachment, to give without demanding in return. It is possible to be profoundly connected to another human being while retaining your own sense of inner freedom and peace. This state is not a fantasy. It is the natural state of a mind that has been freed from the grip of craving. The fourth noble truth is the prescription for the cure. The way to this freedom is to walk the Noble Eightfold Path. The path provides a complete toolkit for transforming our relationships from battlegrounds of the ego into playgrounds for wisdom and compassion. The wisdom factors, right understanding, and right thought allow us to see that our partner is also a being caught in their own patterns, driven by their own suffering. This insight helps us to depersonalize their actions and cultivate the intention of goodwill, even when we feel hurt. The ethical conduct factors especially. Right speech give us the practical tools to communicate with kindness and honesty, to stop using our words as weapons, and to express our needs without blame or accusation. Setting a clear, compassionate boundary is a profound act of right action. And the mental discipline factors, right effort, mindfulness, and concentration are our training in real time. Mindfulness allows us to catch the pattern as it is being triggered, creating that sacred pause between stimulus and reaction. In that pause, we can use right effort to abandon the reactive thought and deliberately cultivate a compassionate one, all supported by the stability of a mind trained in concentration. With these tools, we can begin to understand the true meaning of letting go in a relationship. It does not necessarily mean ending the relationship. It means letting go of our tight-fisted attempt to control the other person and the outcome of the situation. It means releasing them from the impossible job of making us happy. It means taking responsibility for our own inner state. We learn to offer love, kindness, and support freely, without it being a transaction designed to get something back. Sometimes, as we practice this inner letting go, the relationship transforms in beautiful and unexpected ways, becoming more authentic and loving. Other times, this practice gives us the clarity and strength to walk away from a connection that is truly and consistently harmful. But the focus is always on our own inner liberation, not on changing the other person. There is a simple story of two goats who meet in the middle of a very narrow bridge, high above a river. There is no room for them to pass. Both goats, driven by their own pride and stubbornness, insist on their right of way. They lock horns, and in their struggle, they both lose their balance and fall to their doom in the river below. This is the story of two egos in conflict. But imagine a different scenario. Imagine one goat, possessing a little wisdom, sees the futility of the battle. It has the humility to bow down, to make itself small, so that the other goat can carefully step over it. In this act of wise surrender, both are saved. In our relationships, our rigid patterns, and our need to be right are these stubborn goats. The practice of the path is learning how to bow. It is the wisdom of letting go of the ego's demands in favor of compassion, peace, and true freedom. Our relationships are not a distraction from our spiritual path. They are the path itself, calling us into its most challenging and most rewarding work. From the intricate dynamics of our relationships, we now turn our attention inward to an experience that is, for many in our modern world, a constant and unwelcome companion. It is the low-grade hum of dread that underlies a seemingly peaceful day, the sudden, heart-pounding certainty that disaster is imminent. It is the racing mind in the middle of the night, playing out catastrophic scenarios that never come to pass. This is the state of anxiety, a pervasive and exhausting pattern of worry, and fear. Buddhist wisdom approaches this profound form of suffering not as a personal failing or a chemical defect to be eliminated, but as a conditioned habit of the mind. It offers us a way to understand the anatomy of our fear and, through that understanding, to change our relationship to it, so that while fear may still visit, it no longer has the power to rule our lives. To heal an ailment, the great physician first diagnoses its cause. When we look at anxiety through the lens of the three poisons, we see its roots clearly. At its core, anxiety is a powerful manifestation of aversion. It is a violent pushing away, a desperate no to our own experience. We feel the first flicker of unease, the first physical sensation of a tightening chest, and our immediate reaction is to resist it. We want it to go away. This very resistance, this aversion to the feeling of fear itself, is the second arrow. It pours fuel on the fire, creating a vicious cycle. We feel fear, then we feel fear about feeling fear, which creates more fear. The suffering of anxiety is not just the initial fear, but our intense struggle against it. This aversion is fed by a deep delusion. Anxiety is a state of being lost in a fictional narrative. We are deluded into believing that our catastrophic thoughts are accurate predictions of the future. We forget the fundamental truth of impermanence, believing that if a feared event were to happen, the resulting pain would be a permanent and unbearable disaster. We are also deluded by the belief in a solid, vulnerable self. The entire project of anxiety is an attempt to protect this imaginary, fragile me from potential future harm. The more solid and precious our sense of self, the more there is to fear for, and the more anxious we become. Subtly, anxiety can also be fueled by greed. Often, our greatest fears are the shadow side of our strongest attachments. We cling so tightly to a desired outcome, a successful career, a perfect relationship, a state of perfect health, that the possibility of not achieving it or of losing it becomes a source of chronic, gnawing anxiety. Our grasping for security is the very thing that makes us feel so insecure. The defining characteristic of anxiety is its geography. It is a mental state that, by its very nature, cannot exist in the present moment. Anxiety lives exclusively in the future. It is a story we tell ourselves about a what-if that has not happened and may never happen. What if I lose my job? What if they reject me? What if this feeling never goes away? The mind leaves the reality of the present, the feeling of the chair beneath you, the sound of the room around you, and travels into a phantom future where it builds elaborate architectures of dread. Therefore, the most direct and powerful antidote to anxiety is to gently but firmly escort the mind out of the imaginary future and back to the only time that is ever real, right now. This is where the practice of mindfulness becomes our greatest ally. When you feel the familiar storm of anxiety begin to gather, the mind racing with worried thoughts, and the body tensing in preparation for a non-existent threat, the practice is to ground yourself in the physical, tangible reality of the present. You can begin with the anchor of the breath. Your thoughts may be in a catastrophic future, but your breath is happening right now. Place all of your attention on the simple, physical sensation of the air entering your nostrils, filling your lungs, and then leaving your body. Don't try to change it, just feel it. The breath is real. The story in your head is not. Another powerful anchor is the feeling of your feet on the floor. Take a moment to truly feel the contact, the pressure, the solidity of the ground beneath you. It is holding you up. You are, in this moment, physically supported and safe. Wiggle your toes. Feel the texture of your socks or the floor. This simple act pulls your awareness out of the abstract world of thought and into the direct world of physical sensation. You can expand this by engaging all your senses. Look around the room and silently name 5 things you can see: a lamp, a book, a crack in the wall. Then, Notice 4 things you can feel: the fabric of your shirt, the smoothness of the table, the warmth of your hands. Notice 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This practice yanks the spotlight of your attention out of the future and plants it firmly in the undeniable reality of the present sensory world. Once you have established a foothold in the present, you can begin the deeper practice of observing the mind itself, a practice of depersonalizing the anxiety. Instead of being lost in the thought, "I am so anxious," you can learn to observe with a calm distance. I see that the energy of anxiety is present in the body and mind. This shift from "I am" to "I see" is the beginning of freedom. It is the wisdom of no self in action. You are not the storm. You are the sky watching the storm. You can then turn your curious, non-judgmental attention to the raw physical sensations of the anxiety. Notice the tightness in the chest, the flutter in the stomach, the racing of the heart. Instead of resisting them, just observe them as pure energy, pure sensation. See that they, like all things, are impermanent. They pulse, they change, they intensify, and they subside. When you stop fighting them, you stop feeding them. You are allowing the wave to crest and pass without adding the second arrow of resistance. In addition to the calming presence of mindfulness, we can also actively cultivate the wholesome opposite of anxiety. The mental state of anxiety is one of contraction, coldness, and fear. Its direct antidote is the state of warmth, openness, and friendliness, the state of metta. When you are in the grip of fear, a powerful practice is to place a hand on your own heart, to feel the warmth of your own touch, and to offer yourself the words you would offer a frightened child. Silently repeat to yourself, "May I be safe. May I be peaceful. May I be free from this fear." This act of self-compassion is not a denial of the fear, but a tender holding of it. It soothes the agitated nervous system and short-circuits the self-judgment that so often accompanies anxiety. There is an old story of a man who was terrified of his own shadow and the sound of his own footsteps. Believing they were monsters chasing him, he decided he had to outrun them. He ran and ran, but the faster he ran, the faster his shadow and the sound of his steps kept pace. He ran with all his might, consumed by terror, until at last he collapsed from exhaustion and died. He never understood that all he had to do was find a large tree and sit down in its shade. In the stillness and the cool of the shade, both his shadow and the sound of his steps would have vanished. In this story, we are that man. Our anxious thoughts are the shadow, and our fearful feelings are the footsteps. Our desperate attempt to outrun them, our worrying, our ruminating, our resisting is the very thing that keeps them chasing us. The practice of mindfulness is the simple, radical act of stopping. It is finding the shade of the present moment and sitting down. It is in this stillness, this gentle, non-reactive presence, that the phantoms we have been chasing us finally dissolve. By learning to relate to our anxiety in this new way, by diagnosing its roots in craving and delusion, and by meeting it with the gentle tools of mindfulness and self-compassion, we take back our own mind. We learn that we can be a safe harbor for our own fear, and in doing so, we discover a peace that is not dependent on the future being predictable, but on our ability to be present for whatever arises. Much of our modern anxiety, however, is not abstract. It is directly tied to the relentless pressures of the material world. This leads us to examine the next great pattern that holds us captive, the trap of materialism. Our exploration of the inner patterns of anxiety has revealed a fundamental truth. Much of our fear is tied to a desperate grasping for security in an insecure world. This grasping is not an individual pathology. It is the central message, the unspoken religion of our modern age. We are born into a civilization that makes us a single, overarching promise: happiness, security, meaning, and worth can be found through acquisition. You can buy it, you can earn it, you can achieve it. This is the gospel of materialism. It whispers to us from every advertisement. It is woven into our economic systems, and it shapes our deepest aspirations. We are taught to believe that an empty feeling inside can be filled by something from the outside. This section is a gentle but unwavering investigation of this belief. It is an invitation to question the most powerful and pervasive pattern of all, and to discover a source of wealth that can never be taken from you. From a Buddhist perspective, materialism is not merely an economic system, it is a state of mind. It is the poison of greed, institutionalized and elevated to the status of a cultural virtue. It actively cultivates within us the mindset of a praeta, one of the hungry ghosts from ancient Buddhist cosmology. A hungry ghost is depicted as a being with a monstrous, aching belly that can never be filled, and a throat as thin as a needle, so that only the smallest morsel can pass through. It is a creature defined by a ravenous, insatiable thirst. Our consumer culture is a factory for hungry ghosts. It is designed to create and then exploit this feeling of perpetual lack. It tells us that our lives are incomplete, our appearance is flawed, our happiness is deficient, and that the solution is always just one purchase away. This endless chase is described by modern psychologists as the hedonic treadmill. We believe that a certain achievementa pay raise, a new car, a larger house, will be the thing that finally brings us lasting satisfaction. We work tirelessly, we sacrifice our time and peace of mind, and we finally attain our goal. And for a moment, we feel a surge of pleasure and pride. But then, something insidious happens. We adapt. The new car becomes just the car. The bigger house becomes the new baseline. The excitement fades, and the old, familiar sense of underlying dissatisfaction, of dukkha, returns. But now, the thirst has recalibrated to a new, higher level. The next object of our desire must be even bigger, better, and more expensive to provide the same temporary high. We are running faster and faster on a treadmill, putting in immense effort, but our fundamental level of well-being remains unchanged. This pattern is intensified by the poison of the comparison mind. Materialism thrives on a culture of social comparison. Our sense of well-being becomes contingent not on what we have, but on how. What we have measures up to what others have. We buy a new car, not just for transportation, but for the status it confers. Our job is not just a way to contribute our skills, but a title that places us on a particular rung of the social ladder. We post photographs of our vacations, not just to share memories, but to curate an image of a happy and successful life. This is a game with no finish line, because there will always be someone with a bigger house, a more prestigious job, or a more exotic vacation. It is a system designed to create widespread envy, which is a form of aversion, and pride, which is a form of delusion. It turns life into a competition where the prize is always just out of reach. The Buddhist path offers a radical and liberating alternative to this exhausting chase. The practice of contentment, or santuti. It is crucial to understand that contentment is not the same as complacency. It does not mean resigning oneself to a life of passive misery or giving up on improving one's situation. Contentment is the profound and joyful peace that arises from appreciating what is already present, rather than obsessing over what is absent. It is the conscious shift in attention from what I lack to what I have. It is the discovery that our well-being is not dependent on external conditions. This is the beginning of an unshakable inner security. This leads to the practice of voluntary simplicity. Again, this is not about a forced or aestheticized poverty. It is about the intentional reduction of our needs in order to increase our freedom. Every single object we possess also possesses a part of us. It requires our time, our energy, our money, and our worry. We must earn the money to buy it. We must find a place to store it. We must clean it, maintain it, insure it, and worry about it being lost, stolen, or broken. By consciously simplifying our lives, by learning to distinguish between our genuine needs and our conditioned wants, we free up immense reserves of mental and physical energy. Mindfulness is the key tool here. When the urge to acquire something new arises, we can pause and investigate. What is this feeling? Is this a true need? Or is this an attempt to soothe my anxiety, to numb my boredom, or to impress someone? Often, we find that the desire is a symptom of a deeper inner unrest. By addressing the unrest directly, the desire to acquire often dissolves on its own. The Buddha's teaching does not condemn wealth or prosperity. He frequently advised lay people on how to manage their finances responsibly and live comfortably. The problem is not money. The problem is our attachment to it and the delusion that it is the ultimate refuge. To counter this delusion, he offered a far more profound and reliable definition of wealth. He taught of the 7 noble treasures, or Arya Dana. This is a form of wealth that cannot be devalued by inflation, lost in a market crash, or stolen by thieves. It is a source of inner wealth that grows the more you use it. The first treasure is faith or conviction. This is not blind belief, but a deep and abiding confidence in the truth of the path, in the law of karma, and in our own innate potential for awakening. This faith gives our life a noble purpose and direction, a treasure far more valuable than any financial goal. The second is virtue. This is the wealth of a clear conscience. It is the deep inner peace and self-respect that comes from living a life of harmlessness, of cultivating right speech and right action. This treasure protects us from the pain of remorse and fills us with a sense of inner dignity. The third and fourth treasures are shame and fear of wrongdoing. These may sound negative, but they are considered precious protectors. They are our inner moral compass, our natural, intuitive aversion to thoughts, words, and deeds that would cause harm to ourselves or others. They are a sign of our sanity and self-respect, the guardians of our virtue. The fifth treasure is learning. This is the wealth of having heard and studied the timeless wisdom of the Dharma. This knowledge enriches our minds, provides guidance in times of difficulty, and continually illuminates our path. It is a treasure that nourishes our understanding and inspires our practice. The sixth treasure is generosity. This is the radical discovery that true wealth lies not in what we accumulate, but in what we give away. The act of giving, whether it is our time, our attention, or our material resources, directly counteracts the poison of greed. It breaks the spell of the hungry ghost. The joy and warmth that arise from a genuine act of generosity is a treasure that enriches the heart in a way that no possession ever can. And the seventh and supreme treasure is wisdom. This is the direct, penetrating insight into the nature of reality, the experiential understanding of impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and no self. This is the treasure that cuts through all delusion, uproots all suffering, and leads to complete and unshakable liberation. It is the ultimate source of security and peace. In the end, we are all faced with the undeniable truth of our own mortality. You can spend a lifetime accumulating immense financial wealth, a portfolio of properties, a collection of luxury goods, but the hearse that carries your body to the grave will not have a luggage rack. We enter this world with empty hands, and we leave it with empty hands. The only things we truly take with us are the qualities we have cultivated in our own heart and mind the karmic legacy of our actions. The trap of materialism is the pattern of spending our entire precious human life accumulating things that we must ultimately leave behind, while neglecting the cultivation of the only treasures that truly matter. The path of wisdom is the recognition of this truth, and the joyful commitment to cultivating a wealth that death cannot touch. Our journey has taken us through the great landscapes of the Eightfold Path, from the clarifying heights of wisdom to the solid ground of ethical conduct. We have learned to see our patterns and to live in a way that creates less harm and more peace. We now arrive at the heart of the inner work, the dedicated laboratory where all this theory and understanding is forged into lived, unshakable reality. This is the practice of meditation, known in the Buddhist tradition as bhavana, which means mental cultivation. It is a practice that can seem mysterious or intimidating, but at its core, it is the simplest and most radical thing we can do. It is the act of consciously stopping. In a world that constantly demands that we do more, achieve more, and become more, meditation is the revolutionary act of non-doing, of simply being present with ourselves, exactly as we are. Before stepping into this laboratory, we must first clear away the myths that so often discourage us before we even begin. The first and most common myth is that the goal of meditation is to empty the mind or to stop thinking. This is simply not true. The mind's nature is to produce thoughts, just as a gland's nature is to secrete hormones. Trying to force the mind to be silent is a recipe for frustration and failure. The goal is not to stop our thoughts, but to change our relationship to them. It is to learn to see them as passing clouds in the vast sky of awareness, rather than being swept away by the storm. A busy, distracted mind during meditation is not a sign that you are bad at it. It is a sign that you have a human mind, and it is the perfect opportunity to practice the gentle art of returning again and again to the present moment. The second myth is that meditation is merely a relaxation technique. While a deep sense of calm and relaxation is often a wonderful benefit of the practice, it is not its ultimate purpose. The true purpose of Buddhist meditation is insight, or vipassana. It is to see with profound clarity the true nature of our own experience. It is the practice of waking up from the dream of our conditioned patterns, not a technique for spacing out or escaping our problems. The third great myth is the very idea that one can be good or bad at meditation. The practice is not defined by achieving a particular state of blissful silence. The practice happens in the moment you realize your mind has wandered into a thought about dinner or a worry about work, and with gentle kindness, you guide it back to your anchor of attention, like the breath. That moment of return is the victory. That is the precious repetition that strengthens the muscle of mindfulness. To let go of the concepts of success and failure is the first step to a sustainable and fruitful practice. In the Buddhist tradition, meditation practice is often described as having two essential aspects, like the two wings of a single bird. Both are necessary for balanced flight. The first wing is samatha, which means tranquility, calm, or concentration. The purpose of samatha practice is to tame the wild monkey mind, the restless, scattered energy that constantly jumps from one thought to another. The primary technique for developing samatha is to focus the attention on a single, neutral object, most commonly the physical sensation of the breath as it enters and leaves the body. Each time the mind wanders, we gently and patiently bring it back. Over time, with consistent practice, the mind begins to settle. The frenetic inner chatter begins to quiet down. The muddy water of our thoughts, constantly agitated by our daily lives, begins to clarify as the sediment settles to the bottom. This practice develops the stability and power of a concentrated mind, the state of samadhi. It creates a steady, unwavering inner platform like the solid base of a telescope, from which we can then see deeply. The second wing is vipassana, which means clear seeing or insight. Once the mind has gained some measure of stability and clarity through samatha practice, we can then use that focused attention to investigate the nature of our experience. The spotlight of awareness, now bright and steady, is broadened to observe the entire flow of reality as it unfolds, moment by moment. We watch the ever-changing stream of bodily sensations, the arising and passing of pleasant and unpleasant feelings, and the ceaseless parade of thoughts, memories, and images that move through the mind. We observe all of this with a curious and receptive attention, without judging, without clinging, and without pushing away. The purpose of vipassana is not to calm the mind, but to understand the mind. It is in this clear, direct seeing that we gain experiential insight into the three marks of existence. We don't just think about impermanence, we directly witness a thought arise and vanish. We don't just theorize about no self, we look for a thinker behind the thought and find nothing there. This direct insight is the wisdom that has the power to cut the roots of our suffering. These two wings, samatha and vipassana, work in perfect harmony. Samatha provides the calm and the power. Vipassana provides the insight and the wisdom. A practice that is all samatha can lead to a pleasant, trance-like state, but without the wisdom to liberate the mind. A practice that is all vipassana without a stable base of calm can be agitating and overwhelming. Cultivated together, they create a mind that is both serene and sharp, both peaceful and penetratingly clear. This formal sitting practice is our sacred laboratory in the chaos of daily life. When a deep-seated pattern like anger is triggered, we are often completely hijacked by it before we even know what has happened. We say the harsh word, we send the angry email, and we are left to deal with the painful karmic consequences. But on the meditation cushion, we create a safe and controlled environment to study these very same energies. As you sit in stillness, a memory might arise that sparks a familiar flicker of anger. A thought about a future task might trigger a wave of anxiety. Here, in the quiet of your practice, the pattern emerges. But now, you have a choice. You are not under pressure to speak or act. You can simply observe. You can feel the heat of anger as pure energy in your chest. You can watch the anxious thoughts appear and disappear like writing on water. You are meeting your inner demons not on the chaotic battlefield of life, but in the safe container of your meditative awareness. Each time you do this, each time you meet a difficult state with non-reactive presence, you are profoundly retraining your nervous system. You are carving a new neural pathway. You are rehearsing a new and wiser response, so that when the storm hits in your daily life, you will be better prepared to meet it as the calm, spacious sky. For those wishing to begin, the instructions are simple. Find a posture that is both comfortable and dignified. Sitting in a chair is perfectly fine. The key is to have your back upright, but not stiff, in a posture that embodies relaxed alertness. Set a timer for a short period. 5 or 10 minutes a day, practiced consistently, is far more beneficial than one heroic hour on the weekend. The most important ingredient of all is your attitude. Approach this time not as another chore on your to-do list, but as a radical act of kindness and love for yourself. It is a gift of presence you offer to your own heart. Our minds are often like a glass of water taken from a muddy river. It is cloudy, turbulent, and opaque. Our frantic attempts to fix our thoughts are like shaking the glass, only making it murkier. The practice of meditation is the simple, profound act of setting the glass down. We do not need to do anything to the mud. We simply allow the glass to be still. And through the natural laws of gravity, the mud slowly, gently settles to the bottom. The water, of its own accord, becomes clear. our mind is just like this. The stillness of meditation allows the turbulence of our conditioned patterns to settle, revealing the inherent clarity, brightness, and peace of our own true nature. This is not an escape from life. It is the most direct and courageous way to engage with it, training ourselves to meet every moment with a wise and open heart. Our journey thus far has been one of profound excavation and purification. We have learned to shine the light of mindfulness into the dark corners of the mind, to identify the karmic roots of our patterns, and to gently cease watering the weeds of our unwholesome habits. We have learned to sit with our discomfort, to befriend our demons. This is the essential work of clearing the ground. But a spiritual path is not merely about ceasing to do harm. It is also about the joyful and deliberate cultivation of the good. Having learned to be a careful weeder, we now learn to become a skillful and abundant seed sower. This is the proactive stage of the path, where we move from simply reacting to our past karma to consciously creating the causes for a beautiful and liberated future. We are not just the inheritors of our past, we are the architects of our destiny. The creation of positive or wholesome karma need not be a grand or heroic affair. The mind is an exquisitely sensitive field, and even the smallest, most humble seeds of goodness, when planted with a pure intention, can grow into great and shady trees of peace and happiness. The opportunities to plant these seeds are not rare. They present themselves to us in almost every moment of our waking lives. This is the practice of bringing mindful intention into the fabric of our ordinary day. When you offer a genuine, unforced smile to a stranger you pass on the street, you are planting a seed of goodwill, of metta. When you let another car merge into your lane in heavy traffic, you are planting a seed of patience and generosity. When you take a moment to truly listen to a friend without planning your own response, you are offering the profound gift of your presence, planting a seed of compassion. Each of these small acts is a form of mental cultivation. By choosing kindness over indifference, patience over irritation, and generosity over self-preoccupation, you are actively carving new, wholesome neural pathways in your own mind. You are consciously choosing to create the causes for a more peaceful and pleasant inner world. The practice is to begin noticing these countless daily opportunities. Instead of seeing our interactions as mundane or transactional, we can see them as a continuous opportunity to practice, to plant seeds of goodness that will benefit both ourselves and others in ways we may never fully know. Among the most powerful practices for generating positive karma is the cultivation of generosity, known as dana or karga. Generosity is considered a cornerstone of the Buddhist path because it strikes directly at the heart of the poison of greed and the illusion of the separate self. It is the joyful art of letting go. Like right speech, generosity is not a simple, one-dimensional act. It has many forms. There is, of course, the giving of material things, offering food to the hungry, donating money to a worthy cause, giving a thoughtful gift to a friend. But there is also the giving of fearlessness. When you offer comfort to someone who is afraid, when you create a safe emotional space for someone to be vulnerable, or when you stand up for someone who is being mistreated, you are giving the profound gift of safety. This is a high and noble form of generosity. Highest of all, according to the Buddha, is the gift of the Dharma. This is the sharing of the wisdom that leads to the end of suffering. When you share a helpful teaching with a friend, recommend an inspiring book, or simply embody the qualities of mindfulness and compassion in your own life, providing a living example for others, you are giving a gift of immeasurable value. You are giving someone the tools for their own liberation. But perhaps the most available form of generosity for all of us is the giving of our time, our energy, and our kind, non-judgmental attention. In our frantic and distracted world, the simple act of putting down our phone and offering someone our full, undivided presence is an act of profound generosity. The true power of giving, however, lies not in the object being given, but in the intention of the giver. To give with the hope of receiving praise, recognition, or something in return is to taint the act with the poison of greed. But to give with a pure heart, with a simple and sincere wish for the well-being of the other, is to plant a powerful seed of wholesome karma. The act of letting go itself creates a feeling of lightness, joy, and abundance in the mind. It is the direct antidote to the contracted, fearful poverty mentality of the hungry ghost. Generosity is the radical discovery that the more we give, the richer we become. Complementing the outward flowing practice of generosity is the inward-looking practice of gratitude, or katanyuta. If generosity is the joy of giving, gratitude is the joy of appreciating. It is the conscious practice of shifting our attention away from what is wrong, what is missing, and what is lacking in our lives, and focusing instead on the vast abundance that is already present. Our minds have a natural negativity bias. They are like Velcro for bad experiences and Teflon for good ones. Gratitude is the intentional retraining of this bias. The practice can be simple. At the end of each day, you might take a few moments to, mentally or in a journal, reflect on 3 specific things for which you are grateful. They do not need to be monumental. Perhaps it is the warmth of the sun on your skin, the simple pleasure of a hot cup of coffee, a kind word from a colleague, or the fact that you have a roof over your head and food to eat. By consciously bringing these things to mind, you are watering the wholesome seeds in your garden. You are cultivating a mind that is attuned to joy and wonder. Gratitude is a powerful antidote to the habit of complaining, which is a form of aversion, and to the feeling of lack, which is a form of greed. It does not deny that difficulties exist, but it places them in the larger context of the many blessings we so often take for granted. Finally, as our practice deepens, we can engage in a beautiful and transformative practice known as the dedication of merit, or patidana. This practice helps to purify our motivation and expand our compassion to an infinite degree. After performing any wholesome action after a period of meditation, an act of generosity, or even a simple moment of mindfulness, we consciously dedicate the positive energy, the merit of that action. We do not try to hoard this good karma for our own personal benefit. Instead, with a heartfelt intention, we offer it for the well-being of all. We can make a silent dedication in our own words, something like, "By the merit of this wholesome act, may all beings, without exception, be well. May all beings be happy. May all beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering." This simple mental act is incredibly powerful. It shatters the ego's tendency to take pride in its good deeds. It transforms every moment of practice into an expression of universal love. It aligns our heart with the great bodhisattva ideal of living for the awakening of all. By wishing for others to benefit from our goodness, we are in no way diminishing our own. We are, in fact, magnifying it beyond measure. Through these small, daily acts of kindness, the joyful cultivation of generosity, the inner appreciation of gratitude, and the selfless dedication of merit, we become powerful agents of positive change in the world. We realize that we are not simply at the mercy of our past karma. We are, in every moment, planting the seeds for our future. We are actively, deliberately, and joyfully transforming the garden of our mind and our world from a place of scarcity and conflict into a place of beauty, abundance, and boundless compassion. However, this path of cultivation is not always a straight line. We are creatures of habit, and the weeds of our old patterns are stubborn. The journey requires not just enthusiasm, but also a deep and abiding patience for the process. We have journeyed far, exploring the intricate architecture of the mind, the profound laws of karma, and the noble path that leads to freedom. We have filled our hands with powerful tools and our hearts with sincere aspiration. It is easy, at this stage, to fall into a subtle form of idealism, to imagine that the spiritual path is a smooth, linear ascent, a steady climb from the darkness of our patterns into the brilliant sunshine of awakening. But the lived reality of the path is rarely so simple. The truth is that the path is not a straight line. It is often a winding, spiral staircase. There will be moments of breathtaking clarity and expansive peace. But there will also be times when we stumble, when we lose our footing, and when we find ourselves, to our own dismay, right back in the middle of an old, familiar, painful pattern. This experience can be profoundly discouraging. It can lead to the despairing thought that all our efforts have been for nothing, that we are fundamentally flawed, and that liberation is a pipe dream reserved for saints and sages. But this very experience of falling is not an obstacle to the path. It is an integral part of the path itself. The ancient Japanese proverb says, "Fall down 7 times, get up 8. The wisdom of the path is not found in never falling, but in the quality of our rising. This part of our journey is dedicated to the sacred art of getting back up. To work with our setbacks, we must first understand why they happen. They do not happen because we are weak or unworthy. They happen because the forces we are working with are immensely powerful. The first reason we fall is due to the sheer momentum of our past karma, our sankharas. Our patterns of anxiety, anger, or addiction are not frivolous habits. They are deeply grooved pathways in our consciousness, carved by countless repetitions over many years, perhaps many lifetimes. To expect these deep-seated tendencies to vanish overnight is like expecting a massive ocean liner, traveling at full speed, to turn on a dime. It takes a long, sustained, and patient application of a new direction before the ship's momentum finally shifts. In moments of tiredness, stress, or inattention, the old momentum can easily take over, and we find ourselves defaulting to the old, familiar course. Sometimes, a fall is precipitated by the ripening of a particularly powerful karmic seed from our past. We may be practicing diligently, living an ethical life, and then suddenly, we are overwhelmed by a wave of inexplicable depression, or find ourselves in a situation that triggers a rage we haven't felt in years. This can feel like a random and unfair assault. But from a karmic perspective, it is simply a powerful old seed finding the right conditions to sprout. The path does not erase our past karma, but it gives us the tools to meet its ripening with wisdom and non-reactivity, thereby preventing us from planting more of the same seeds for the future. We also stumble because of the subtle persistence of the ego. As we make progress on the path, a new and insidious pattern can emerge: the spiritual ego. We can become proud of our discipline, attached to our states of peace, and subtly judgmental of those who seem less advanced than us. This pride is a form of clinging, a delusion that a solid I is achieving something. And like all forms of clinging, it creates a vulnerability. The moment our peace is disturbed or our practice feels difficult, the spiritual ego feels threatened, and we can fall into a state of profound frustration and self-criticism. The most critical thing to understand is that the fall itself is not the real problem. The initial relapse into a pattern, the harsh words spoken, the drink taken, the wave of anxiety indulged us, the first arrow. It is painful, but it is manageable. The real suffering, the poison that makes us want to abandon the path altogether, comes from the second arrow that we immediately shoot at ourselves. This is the arrow of self-judgment, shame, and despair. It is the voice of the inner critic, now armed with our own spiritual aspirations, saying, "You see, you're a failure. You'll never change. All that meditation was a waste of time. You're a fraud." This cascade of self-aversion is far more damaging than the original lapse. It is this second arrow that turns a simple stumble into a catastrophic fall. The antidote to this second arrow, the medicine for the despair of having fallen, is the profound quality of patience, known in Pali as khanti. This is not a passive, gritting your teeth kind of waiting. Khanti is an active and courageous virtue. It is a forbearance born of wisdom. It is, first, patience with the process itself. We must understand that we are engaged in the deepest and most difficult work a human being can undertake, the deconditioning and liberation of a mind. It takes time. A seed does not become a mighty oak tree overnight. There are seasons of growth, seasons of dormancy, and times when the seedling is battered by storms. We must trust the process, knowing that every moment of practice, every act of kindness, every return to the breath is nourishing the roots, even when we cannot see the growth on the surface. Even more importantly, we must cultivate patience with ourselves. This is self-compassion in its most practical form. When you have fallen, when you are sitting amidst the wreckage of a repeated mistake, this is the moment for supreme kindness. It is the time to place a hand on your own heart and to speak to yourself not with the voice of the drill sergeant, but with the voice of a wise and loving grandparent. Ah, my dear, you have fallen. This is painful. It is okay. Rest here for a moment. Let us see what we can learn. To meet our own failure with this kind of unconditional tenderness is a revolutionary act. It is the direct application of loving kindness when we need it most, and it completely disarms the vicious inner critic. The necessary partner to patience is persistence, or virya. This is the energy, diligence, and heroic effort that balances the softness of patience. It is the getting up 8 to the falling down 7. Virya is the joyful and courageous resolve to begin again. Its power lies in its immediacy. The moment you realize you have been lost in thought, the moment you realize you have been caught in a pattern, that very moment of realizing is the moment you are back on the path. There is no need for a dramatic ritual of repentance. There is no need to wallow in guilt for an hour or a day. The practice is simply to notice and to gently, without drama, begin again. Return to the breath. Re-establish your kind intention. Take the next step. Persistence on the path is not about being a perfect practitioner. It is about becoming a perfect beginner, willing to start over with a fresh mind in every single moment. This combination of patience and persistence allows us to reframe the entire experience of failure. A setback is no longer a verdict on our worth or a sign that the path isn't working. A setback is simply data. It is a precious, though painful, piece of feedback. It is like a stress test on a bridge. The point where it breaks shows you exactly where the structure is weakest and needs reinforcement. When we fall back into anger, it shows us that our understanding of aversion is still intellectual, not fully embodied. When we are consumed by anxiety, it shows us where our attachments to security are still strongest. When we act out of greed, it shows us the deep-seated belief in lack that still resides in our heart. Each fall, when met with mindful inquiry instead of shame, becomes an invaluable lesson. It points directly to the next area of our work, illuminating the path forward with undeniable clarity. On this long and sometimes arduous journey, it is immensely helpful not to walk alone. The Buddha spoke of the 3 jewels that provide refuge for a practitioner: the Buddha, the example of the awakened mind; the Dharma, the teachings and the truth; and the Sangha, the community of fellow practitioners. The importance of Sangha cannot be overstated. This may be a formal meditation group, a relationship with a wise teacher, or even just 1 or 2 trusted Dharma friends with whom we can speak openly and honestly about our practice and our struggles. When we are lost in the shame of our own perceived failure, a friend on the path can remind us of our common humanity, sharing their own stories of stumbling. When we feel like giving up, the Sangha can offer encouragement and inspiration. The community acts as a container, a collective field of practice that holds us, supports us, and gently holds us accountable to our own highest aspirations. There is a famous story from Scottish history of King Robert the Bruce, who, after suffering a series of devastating military defeats, was hiding in a cave, ready to give up his cause entirely. As he lay there in despair, he watched a small spider trying to spin a web across the cave's entrance. Time after time, the spider would try to fix its thread to a distant point, and time after time, it would fall. The king watched as the spider failed 6 times. He saw his own struggle reflected in the tiny creature. But on the 7th attempt, the spider finally succeeded and began to skillfully weave its web. Inspired by the creature's relentless persistence, the king found new resolve, left the cave, rallied his forces, and eventually won his nation's freedom. We are all, in our own way, that spider. We are trying to weave a web of awakening in the vast cave of our own consciousness. We will fall again and again. The threads of mindfulness will break. The winds of our old karma will blow us off course. The practice is not to curse our falling. The practice is to admire the instinct that causes us to try again. The path to liberation is paved not with the stones of perfection, but with the countless, courageous acts of beginning again. The grace is not in never stumbling. The grace is in the getting up. We have followed the ancient and noble path to its very end. We have walked through the gates of wisdom, cleansed our lives with the waters of ethical conduct, and forged our minds in the fires of meditative discipline. We have learned to be patient with our stumbles and persistent in our return to the practice. We have examined our deepest patterns of suffering, not as shameful flaws to be hidden, but as teachers in disguise. And so, we arrive at the final destination, the very purpose of this entire profound undertaking. Where does this path lead? What is the fruit of all this effort? The answer points to a state so simple and so profound that it challenges the very limits of our language. It is called liberation, or vimutti. It is the experience of nibbana. Before we attempt to describe this state, we must first clear away the thicket of misconceptions that surround it. Nibbana, or nirvana, is not a physical place, not a heavenly realm we go to after we die. It is not an eternal state of blissful, spaced-out trance, nor is it the cold annihilation of the personality. It is something far more immediate, practical, and real. It can be understood as a state of supreme and unshakable mental health. It is the end of conflict, the cessation of striving, the unburdening of the mind. It is a freedom so absolute that it can be tasted and known in this very life, in this very world. To better understand what liberation is, it is helpful to first understand what it is not. Liberation is not the absence of feelings. A fully awakened being still experiences the raw data of life through the senses. They still feel pleasant sensations and unpleasant sensations. The searing pain of a physical injury is still felt as pain. The warmth of the sun is still felt as warmth. The crucial difference is that the second arrow is never fired. The unpleasant feeling is met with a calm, equanimous mind, without the added layers of mental resistance, fear, or self-pity. The pleasant feeling is enjoyed and appreciated fully, without the desperate, anxious clinging that fears its departure. The river of feeling flows through them, but it no longer has the power to flood the landscape of the mind. Liberation is not the absence of a personality. An awakened master is not a blank, colorless automaton. They still possess their unique character, their sense of humor, their particular way of speaking and moving through the world. The difference is that they are no longer identified with that personality. They see it for what it is, a conditioned, impermanent collection of habits and traits. They do not need to defend it, promote it, or worry about how it is perceived. They wear their personality lightly, like a loose and comfortable garment, rather than being trapped within it like a suit of heavy, restrictive armor. Liberation is not the absence of thoughts. The mind, even a liberated one, will still produce thoughts as a natural function. The difference is that the thoughts have lost their authority. They are no longer believed to be ultimate truths. They are seen for what they are, fleeting, impersonal mental events, like whispers on the wind. A thought like "I am not good enough" might, out of sheer force of old habit, flicker through the mind, but it is seen as just that, a flicker. It is not grasped, not believed, not built into a story of suffering. The liberated mind is no longer a slave to its own commentary. And finally, liberation may not even mean the complete and utter absence of the old patterns. The deepest sankharas, the most ancient karmic grooves, may still occasionally manifest as a faint echo, a subtle impulse. A flicker of the old anger might arise in response to an injustice. The shadow of an old fear might momentarily appear. The difference is that these echoes have no power. They cannot hook the mind. They are like a snake that has had its fangs removed. It may still have the appearance of a snake, but it can no longer poison you. The chain has been broken. So what, then, is the taste of liberation? Words, born of the conditioned world, can only point. They are like a finger pointing at the moon, not the moon itself. The Buddha described Nibbana as the unconditioned, the deathless, the supreme security from bondage. It is a state defined by what it is free from. It is freedom from craving, freedom from aversion, and freedom from delusion. The word Nibbana itself literally means to extinguish or to become cool. It is the cooling of the raging fires of greed, hatred, and ignorance that have driven us our entire lives. This results in a deep, unshakable peace that is not dependent on circumstances. It is a peace that can remain present even amidst the chaos and pain of the world, like the silent depths of the ocean that remain undisturbed by the raging storm on the surface. With the extinguishing of the fires of delusion, particularly the delusion of a separate self, comes the arising of a natural and profound fearlessness. The constant, low-grade anxiety that haunts so much of our lives is rooted in the need to protect and preserve our fragile ego. When it is seen through direct insight that this solid self is an illusion, the very foundation of fear crumbles. What is there to fear for when there is no precious me to defend? This doesn't lead to recklessness, but to a calm, wise, and courageous ability to meet life's uncertainties with an open and untroubled heart. As the boundary between self and other becomes transparent, the qualities of boundless loving kindness and compassion are no longer states we must strive to cultivate. They become the natural expression of the liberated mind. The joy of another is experienced as our own joy. The suffering of another is felt as our own suffering. The wish for all beings to be happy and free is no longer a formal practice, but a spontaneous, radiant energy that flows from the heart without obstruction or agenda. And finally, the taste of liberation includes a spontaneous and uncaused joy. This is not the fleeting, excitable happiness that depends on getting what we want. It is a quiet, profound, and abiding sense of well-being that is the very nature of a mind at peace. It is the simple joy of being, free from the constant, exhausting work of wanting, resisting, and becoming. It is the feeling of having finally set down a heavy, invisible burden that we did not even realize we were carrying. This liberation is not a retreat from the world. It is the prerequisite for engaging with it perfectly. A liberated being does not hide in a cave. They live in the world, but are not owned by it. They can enjoy a delicious meal, a beautiful piece of music, or a loving relationship with full presence and appreciation, because they are not clinging to it as a source of their ultimate happiness. Their actions are no longer dictated by the karmic engine of their own needs and fears. Instead, their words and deeds arise spontaneously from a place of deep wisdom and limitless compassion, naturally creating benefit for all those they encounter. They are no longer a prisoner of the play, desperately trying to control the script. They are a free and masterful actor, able to respond to every scene of life with effortless grace. There is a story of a bird that was born and raised inside a small cage. The cage was the only world it had ever known. The bars were its boundaries, its security, its very identity. One day, its keeper, out of compassion, left the door to the cage wide open, but the bird, conditioned by a lifetime of confinement, continued to hop from perch to perch inside the familiar cage. It would look out at the vast open sky, but it did not understand that the sky was for it. It still identified itself as a caged bird. It did not realize that the only thing keeping it imprisoned was its own belief in the cage. Our painful patterns are this cage. The eightfold path is the discovery that the door has been open all along. Liberation is that final, courageous moment when the bird hops to the threshold, feels the wind beneath its wings for the first time, and takes flight into the boundless sky of its own true nature. The journey of understanding our patterns is not, in the end, about fixing a broken self. It is about the breathtaking realization that we were never truly caged. We began this journey together in a familiar place, a disquieting echo chamber where the same mistakes, the same heartaches, and the same anxieties played out on a loop. We felt like actors in a play we did not write, prisoners of a pattern we could not see. From that place of confusion, we embarked on a path of discovery. We learned to look at these patterns not as a life sentence, but as a message. We followed the thread of their origin back to the universal law of karma, understanding it not as fate, but as the consequence of our own actions and intentions. With the clear, diagnostic lens of the Four Noble Truths, we saw the nature of our ailment, its cause in our own clinging and craving, the profound hope of a cure, and the precise prescription for that cure. The Noble Eightfold Path. We have walked this path together, learning to cultivate the wisdom that sees reality as it is, the ethical conduct that aligns our lives with harmlessness, and the mental discipline that transforms the mind from a turbulent master into a peaceful servant. We learned that the path to healing is not a war against our inner demons, but a courageous act of offering them tea, of meeting our deepest pain with the radical warmth of compassion. From the first recognition of our suffering to the final, liberating taste of freedom, we have seen that the entire journey unfolds not in some distant time or place, but right here, in the landscape of our own heart and mind. If there is a single, essential message to be taken from our time together, it is this: the source of your suffering and the source of your freedom are not in the world outside. They are within you. We are not the helpless victims of our patterns, our past, or our circumstances. We are the architects of our own reality, constantly shaping our future with the quality of our attention and the intention of our heart in this very moment. Peace is not a destination we must struggle to reach. It is the inherent nature of a mind that has learned to let go. The key to the cage we felt trapped in has been in our own pocket all along. The purpose of this journey has not been to turn you into someone else, but to help you awaken to who you have always been, beneath the layers of conditioning and fear. It is not about becoming a perfect person, but about becoming a free person. And this freedom is not a grand, climactic event, but a moment-to-moment practice. It is found in the simple, courageous choice to meet your experience with awareness and kindness, again and again. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step, and that step is always taken right here. So, do not be overwhelmed by the scale of the path. simply begin. Today, notice one small pattern. When it arises, pause, take one conscious breath, offer yourself one kind thought. That is the beginning, that is the middle, and that is the end of the path. It is all contained in the simple, profound grace of this one present moment.